Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ERA workshop on rail traction studies. Good morning to the people online here in Brussels. This workshop is held hybrid via Teams and here at the European Commission premises. This event is recording and the recording will be published on the ERA website. During the Q&A sessions, you can raise your hands to be given the floor in Teams. Please state your name and the name of your organization. We have the chat open in case you want to share any documents, but questions posted in the chat will not be answered because we would like this event to be as live as possible to have an exchange about these draft final reports. Today, we are presenting two studies in the form of the draft final report still. One is the additional study number 2 on the harmonization of electrification systems. This is an assessment if harmonizing the current 4 traction current systems existing mainly in the European network is beneficial. The second study, AS03, additional study 3, is about on-ground energy data collecting systems and metering. This is an evaluation of member states' compliance with the existing technical specifications for interoperability for energy, which has specific requirements on metering, and is also an analysis of the technical, legal, and regulatory issues affecting traction energy billing. The draft final reports have been shared and reviewed with our economic steering group, which is our working group following up on the additional studies. And they have also been shared with other rail sector stakeholders that have contributed to the studies during meetings and interviews. These studies are produced by the EU Agency for Railways in-house, pursuant to Article 9 of the ERA regulation. Further to adaptations and also as a follow-up of today's workshop, the final reports will be published on the ERA website and submitted to the European Commission. These studies are part of the multi-annual TSI revision request that the Commission addressed to our agency. During the day, according to the program, we will have, as of 2 minutes, opening remarks by our ERA Executive Director, Oana Gerginescu. We will have then at 9:30 a presentation about the key findings for the study number 2 on the harmonization of electrification systems, followed at 10 by a Q&A session with all participants online and here in Brussels. After a coffee break at 11, we will have a presentation of the study number 3 on energy metering and data collecting systems, followed at 11:30 by an initial panel discussion with Bart van der Spiegel from Infrabel, who is also the convener of the Senelec working group working on the EN standard for onboard meters. Dire Martin Bransen, the director of ERES, and Esteban Coito Gonzalez, who is our subject matter expert for TSI Energy. At 12, we will open the floor for questions from the whole audience online and here in Brussels. At 12:45, we will have some closing remarks from Veronica Saic from the European Commission. Thank you for your attention, and I will now, as soon as the connection is ready, give the floor to Oana Gerginescu.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for the great interest that you are showing. My understanding is that we have a good attendance in the room and a very good attendance online. So very happy for the interest that you are showing to the traction energy studies. I would like to thank the European Commission for also hosting this event on their premises, and of course, not only for the hosting, but for the very good cooperation all along the process. And talking about the process, just from my side, putting the topic of today quickly in a bigger context, it would be very important for me to underline that these two studies come in a package which is much broader. And that's the package of the TSI revision request, a multi-annual ambition, which was mandated by the European Commission to the agency with very specific requests, amongst which the two studies that we are talking about today. Why is it important for me to put that in context? Because it shows that when the requests on the TSI revision come on the table, they do not jump to the conclusions of what should be revised in the TSIs. And this is a very important aspect for me and for the priorities that I'm taking for the agency. And that's in the spirit of better regulation, because you might have heard me by now saying how important it is that we reason around the proposed changes that we are bringing to the TSIs with proposals from the agency and then the Commission taking forward the process. That is important to understand how mature the content of those changes is and how can we get to the best proposals on the tables for the changes in the TSIs. The objective is to have very mature, good content TSIs that we keep stable over time. And what can be better to support that objective than actually collecting the right evidence at the right moment in time? For us, it is important to have the robust evidence which can drive proper proposals in the changes in the TSI governance as a process. So today we have a very good example of that, and the topics of the two studies are very important in the context of another objective that I would like to put forward, which is the competitiveness and the cost effectiveness of rail. In the context of the agency's work, we are very proud to have been able to respond to the Commission request by a mix of elements. One of the elements is, of course, the team expertise, and you will be in direct contact and exchange with my competent colleagues on the side of ERA and, of course, on the side of the European Commission. Another ingredient for the success of these studies is, in my opinion, the stronger and stronger data and intelligence that we have in the ERA registers. And this is an important ingredient on which I would like to continue to build, because this is where we are able to extract evidence, objective inputs, and that's helping, of course, steering the decision-making in a very fact-based approach. And of course, third ingredient, which is key, is the proximity and the very good cooperation with all the actors in the EU rail system. And that again, for me, is a recipe for success, putting the technical expertise, the data, and then, of course, the cooperation at system level are the elements that we will be seeking for in other instances as well. I touched upon briefly before on the objective of competitiveness and cost effectiveness. And many of us have had the opportunity to be quite recently in November in an important event organized by the Danish presidency, which had at its core the importance of reducing costs in rail. And of course, of boosting the competitiveness and of strengthening the business case for rail. And of course, traction energy is an element which cannot escape unnoticed when we are discussing about the cost model in rail when we are discussing about interoperability, and of course, when we are discussing about sustainability. So with all these elements on the table, I think we have a very good basis to push forward around some key objectives. And the spirit and the purpose of today's workshop is to also show something that we are putting more and more in place at agency level, which is the openness. So what we are planning to do today, together with my colleagues, is to actually invite you to provide your comments and your feedback to the draft studies in a way that your feedback can be taken into account before the final reports are being put forward to the European Commission. So grateful if you can take this opportunity on board. We are actually doing it for the purpose of having this feedback loop, which is very important for the agency. I will not dwell too much in the content of the two studies, because there are people who are way better prepared than me today who will drive you through the content and drive the discussions and the exchanges. But if I look at the topics of the two studies from the perspective of the big important objectives that we have for the agency, and if we take the first study, which is about the harmonization of electrification systems, it's a reality. Of course, I'm not saying anything new. We have a patchwork of voltage systems across Europe. So that's a reality that we acknowledge we need to work with. And of course, the idea around the potential harmonization of moving towards a target system for a voltage and for frequency is not a new one. Already back in 2009, the agency was already invited to assess the situation. And back then in time, it was determined that there was not a very strong case to mandate a unique voltage system for the entire Europe. And there we are, 16 years after, looking again at the same topic. And it's actually the moment to show that based on the analysis and the evidence that we have collected, and also looking at the evolution on the rolling stock side during these 16 years that have elapsed, with more and more potential for multi-system locomotives to mitigate the impacts of the patchwork, we are actually in a position to strengthen the conclusions that we have issued 16 years ago, and to say we do not actually see a strong, full, absolute case of saying we need to move everything to a target system of voltage and frequency in Europe, because that absolute black or white case doesn't actually exist. It is very business case specific. And if we want to be economically viable, we need to integrate this reasoning of the economic viability with the objective of interoperability, and actually have to think of a model which ensures the interoperability, but in a cost-effective way. This is the merit of the study, to drive us through that thinking of understanding the nuances and a more nuanced path, not the absolute binary one, in order to achieve the desired objective of interoperability, which of course remains the clear objective for us. On the second study, which is about the on-ground energy data collection and the metering topic. So there again, I start by saying the obvious, which is we know and we are convinced that railways are an energy efficient mode, and we are very proud to promote that in comparison with all the other modes of transport. Now, the big question there is, does energy efficiency directly means cost efficiency? Ideally, yes. This is what we would like to think, because we want to drive the costs down in rail. But it's exactly during in this transition from energy efficiency to cost efficiency that we have identified some obstacles. And of course, a key desired objective here is that the charging for the energy consumption and the metering, the measurement, are very transparent, are very fair and clear. And that's the topic where the study digs and dwells into the details, into the existing situation in Europe, to actually understand how far or close we are to that very important objective. Because we want to state there is the clear aim to have an energy market in Europe, a single railway market, so single energy, single railway market in Europe. But then we would like to see how in practice rail can actually respond to these very important objectives and build on all the assets that we are promoting. The fact that it's green, the fact that it's sustainable, the fact that we want to make it cost effective and attractive for the users in comparison or in combination with the other modes of transport. I will not go in more detail than this, and I'm sure the day will be the best opportunity to go into the details behind the statements that I made in this opening session. I will need to excuse myself because I will need to move to another meeting, but I am very convinced that I leave you in the very good hands of my colleagues, whom I would like to thank for their work, and that goes to Giacomo, Michel, Eva, Esteban, Gian Vittorio, also to Cyrielle and Sylvie for their support with the organization. And I think very widely in a very good and competent atmosphere for the discussions if I look at the profile of the participants to this workshop. So very much interested from the agency side to get the feedback that you are ready to provide to us on these draft studies. And of course, we will be keeping you all in the loop on the progress that we will be making with the final deliverables on these very important topics. Thank you, and back to you, Giacomo.
Thank you, Anna. We are now right on time to move to the presentation of the study number 2.
Good morning, everybody. I will start with the presentation of the study of AS02. It's a study I conducted with my colleagues Esteban and Eva, who also are with us today. What we would like to do today is the following, and let's see if this works. Yes. I think let me see if everything is visible like this. Yeah, it should be. So a bit of background. So as our executive director already stated at the beginning, like in 2009, the question already emerged for the first time on the agency level about whether the harmonization of electrification systems would pay off, because in fact it's an old one, already many decades before that. On the national level, multiple studies have been conducted if it would make sense to move from one system to another. And also when the TSI Energy was drafted, this question was asked, would it make sense to mandate on a European level one target system? And back then the impact assessment indicated that there was no strong economic case to do so. We're now 16 years later, and we received last year the TSI revision request from the Commission, and the Commission asked the agency, can you review, evaluate what the situation is nowadays, and if there is a potential for harmonization, looking at different scenarios, and tell us if there is a need to review any of the requirements that we have in the TSIs. So that is what we did with this study. We looked at both the infrastructure side and the vehicle side, and I think the main benefit of this study is that we could really leverage the developments that we have been working on in the last years to collect data on a European level to see both how infrastructure and the rolling stock evolves. We also looked at the benefits and cost of electrification from a national and European perspective. And we had a focus on voltage and frequency, but in the discussions that we had, also many other topics related to the energy subsystem also emerged. So we also touch upon several other parameters because we think that was useful. How did we do this? Well, we had over 16 interviews and written inputs. We did large-scale analysis of infrastructure using both the RINF data, Register of Infrastructure, which is hosted by the agency, and also open source input. We actually did the same for the vehicle data. So we built upon the vehicle register, but also on other sources. We had a large consultation round through which we received feedback from over 18 organizations, and we also integrated that feedback. So let me also use this occasion to thank everybody who participated in the interviews, who gave substantial and very detailed feedback. It has been very useful, and we really think it made the study stronger. And we also see this workshop as a final stage in this process to have a look at the inputs that we collected, the findings that we present, and also the recommendations that we want to recommend, and hear your view on those. So what we'll propose to do is to share what we have found, and we also will ask specific points where your additional inputs will be valuable, but also when I do not ask explicitly, don't hesitate to give any additional inputs, because ultimately it will help to improve the final report, which we hope to send out by the end of the year to the Commission. So let me move to the first overview slide. And here you have it. So the state of electrification in Europe, how it is today. When you look at the left side, you see the let's say the different electrification systems and the number of line kilometers and the share of the total line kilometers presented by country. And on the right side, you see how these systems are spread around Europe. And it can be said that it is a patchwork indeed. In Netherlands and France, you see that there are quite a few 1.5 kV DC lines. You see that the 3 kV DC lines are spread across Europe, but not in adjacent countries. For 15 kV AC, there is a network in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and also between Norway and Sweden. And for 25 kV, you see that is, let's say, the electrification system that's most spread throughout Europe. And you also see that, especially in southeastern Europe, there are many countries with this system. Now, one of the issues with this kind of visualization is that it might imply that those countries that have 25 kV or that are adjacent to have the same network are fully integrated. That's not so much the case, and I hope that the following slide can illustrate that better. So what we did is we looked at every cross-border connection in Europe, and we had a look at whether the electrification system on both sides has the same system, if only the border station is connected with the same system, but afterwards it is a different system, or if the border section is completely electrified, but with different systems, right? So you cannot access the next border station with the same system, but if you have a multi-system locomotive that can cross the border, in principle, you can cross it. And we also looked at the non-electrified sections. And to start with the non-electrified sections, what you see also in the bottom right picture, there are many of those. Particularly in Southeastern Europe, you see that even though there you have countries which have, well, almost uniformly the 25 kV network, it is very difficult to cross a border with 25 kV because just the border sections are not electrified. And in some cases, this is just like a few kilometers, right? So it shows that even if you have like a large electrified network, and if the electrification system is in principle harmonized on a regional level, there still can be barriers to cross-border operations. Another interesting aspect to emphasize is that you do have also quite a few cases where the border stations are harmonized. So it is possible to cross the border with the same electrification system, and then it is possible to switch on the station to a different, well, in most cases, a different operator with another operation. So this is a way also to enable cross-border operations without harmonizing fully the electrification systems. Finally, there also are quite a few sections where this doesn't happen. So the electrification system, there's a hard cut at the border, and it's not possible to cross to enter a next station with the same electrification system. So the summary you see on the left side, and you see that there are quite a few barriers to cross-border operations, even on the electrification level. So what does this teach us? It's a patchwork. It's a bit of a mess. That's nothing new. But there are good historical reasons why it evolved as such, and it is basically a reason why on the rolling stock side, evolutions, innovations have happened to cope with this complexity. And we will see in a few slides that basically because of this complexity, the rise of multi-system locomotives is very noticeable, particularly in the last decade. And that's what you see in this picture. So the example of a multi-system locomotive with 4 pantographs, with greater areas of use. And that's a way how, even while these barriers to interoperability exist, innovations have on the rolling stock side have emerged to cope with this complexity. So let me give a bit more details on the rolling stock side. So what you see here is an overview of the number of vehicles that can run on one or more systems. And say these type of visualizations don't show up too often, so please allow me to give a bit of explanation. So you see the 3 different colors. They represent the electric locomotives, the EMUs, electrical multiple units, so train sets, and you also have the high-speed train sets. And all of them have been expressed in single train sets, right? So not the cars, train sets now. Then you see that each bar represents a certain combination of electrification systems on which it can run. So when you look at the leftmost bar, these are the vehicles that can only run, and my screen is a bit small, but yeah, these are the vehicles that can only run on 15 kV AC. Then in the second column, you see the number of vehicles. So these are about, I would say like 7,000 almost, that can run only on 3 kV. But then you also see the vehicles that can run on both 25 kV and 1.5 kV DC. So in most cases, I suspect that these are the French vehicles. And then we see vehicles that can run on both AC voltages. And then we see something interesting. We see the 4-system local and 4-system vehicles. And it's what you see here. These are basically exclusively electric locomotives. That also has to do with the types of operations that are being performed by these vehicles. These are mostly freight locomotives for international operations. And in most cases, they also are owned by, well, in many cases, they're also owned by leasing companies. And yeah, that also has different implications for the type of rolling stock that's being purchased. But in summary, I think we can conclude with this picture that the majority of the vehicles is still single current. But for the locomotives, we see that quite a few of them become multi-system. Now, for then, it's interesting to see how this evolves over time. And that's what you see on this slide. So here we look at the number of vehicles that are being manufactured by year. And there you see the evolution again for the electric locomotives, for the train sets, and for the high-speed train sets. And what you notice is that, well, these are all the vehicles that are still registered in the vehicle registers and indicated as active. What you see then is that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the vehicles were predominantly single system. But over time, especially since the year 2000, you see that more and more multiple system locomotives emerge. And this makes that, I would say that the majority of the locomotives that are being produced nowadays are multi-system locomotives. This evolution we don't see for train sets, and we also see it only partially for high-speed train sets. So you really see there is a divergence occurring, and that is, we believe, also linked to the type of operations, the opening of the market, and the type of players that are active in the passenger transport and in freight transport. But again, this is a confirmation that the barriers that are imposed by the electrification systems are increasingly being mitigated by the emergence of the multi-system locomotives. So one more slide on this, and I think this is a storyline that's linked to this. So I think there is an interplay between legislation and technological innovation happening here, because when we look at the area of use of electric locomotives over time, we see that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the average area of use of a locomotive is basically 1, maybe flatlining. There was no need to cross the borders. Then with a gradual opening up of the international market with legislation, also with the introduction of the TSIs, and also with the authorization on the European level, we see that there is an increase. So from average 1, we see now a movement to, on average, 4 countries in which a locomotive is authorized to operate. And this is the average, right? So there are several locomotives that have a substantially larger area of use. So I think this illustrates that the combination of legislation and technological innovation have an impact, and we also can monitor this impact. So on that, we see that the locomotives have increasingly adapted to the complications that are being imposed. I hope I'm back. I hope everybody can hear me still.
Yeah, there you are again.
Okay. You see, not only the cameras, also the Wi-Fi can be a bit tricky apparently, but glad I'm back again. So what I was saying, locomotives increasingly adapt. So the question can be asked, why would there be a need to re-electrify the lines? Would there then still be any need for a harmonized electrification system? So there are different evaluations on this. Firstly, we can have a look at the cases where it has recently happened, and we have to ask ourselves, like, does this actually happen, that lines are being re-electrified? And what you see here on this slide are a few recent, ongoing or upcoming cases where the re-electrifications are actually happening. So we do have evidence that it happens, and we also know the reason why it happens. It is in cases for the general harmonization of lines within the country, because within the country itself, there are 2 systems active, and there's a need felt to move more to 25 kV. In some cases, also linked to facilitate cross-border connectivity. And in other cases, it's linked to wider upgrading plans, both of the grid and of rail infrastructure. So there's several reasons why we see these re-electrification cases happening. But at the same time, in the study, we also detected many examples of national plans where it was assessed in detail and where the conclusion was that it does not make sense to have these large-scale re-electrification. And we saw this happening in the Netherlands. We saw also studies being performed in Germany, Austria, Norway, several other countries. So we want to give a fair assessment of what the reasons were to electrify and also the reasons not to electrify. And in the study, you will find a detailed overview of all the arguments that have been mentioned, and also the arguments in favor and the arguments against such re-electrification. At this point, I also want to already raise a question to the audience, because we have done the research, but you also know that some cases might have been missed. So if you are aware of cases that are going to happen of re-electrification, also will be very curious to learn from you about this if we have missed anything in this list. So moving to the next slide. And I think this is the most tricky slide that we can present today, because the question is not only if electrification makes sense on a national level, it also is the case if re-electrification would make sense on a European level. And to make such an analysis on a European level, I think, to say the least, is a quite arduous task. And we are also limited by the fact that there have not been that many re-electrification cases, and there certainly have been quite few cases of vehicles that have been retrofitted to work upon multiple systems. So we are limited by the information that we have, and we also are limited by the fact that we need to make some assumptions to make this kind of analysis insightful without being drowned in the details. So it's very much top-down analysis with a purpose to give an order of magnitude about what the implications of re-electrification will be on a European level. So let me give you a bit more insight on what you see here. So what we try to do is to assess 4 different scenarios. So what would happen if you get rid of the 1.5 kV network across Europe? How many line kilometers do you have? How many vehicles do you have in Europe that only can operate on 1.5 kV and would need to be either retrofitted or replaced by other rolling stock? We did the same exercise to also look at 1.5 kV to 3 kV or 1.5 kV to 25 kV. We also looked at what would happen if you move both 1.5 kV and 3 kV both to 25 kV. And we also have like the scenario where you would move to 25 kV all across Europe. So also implying that you would move the 15 kV system to 25 kV. As you can see from the numbers, this is massive. This would have massive consequences in number of vehicles that will need to be adapted and the line kilometers that will need to be adapted. Now, for the costs assumptions that we have here, again, for the vehicle side, we had to base ourselves on the rare examples that we know of. So these are projects in Czechia and Slovakia for reconversion or retrofit of Stadler Flirt EMUs and of the class 163, 162 locomotives. There we got some numbers that we could find. For lines, we also have a few case evidence of the re-electrification projects that you saw before. But the comparability is always different. It's very difficult because in some re-electrification cases, there's also a general upgrade of the network. So it's difficult sometimes to split the re-electrification part from the overall improvements of the track and of the structure. Also looking at the Netherlands, reconverting 1.5 kV to 25 kV also would have huge implications for the upgrades of the train detection systems and train protection. So also towards ERTMS. So these costs are not covered by these numbers here. This is just with the scope that's indicated there. And even then, you talk about let's say an enormous investment that will be needed to harmonize this. We indicated a range -10% plus 10% to give an indication of the uncertainty that is here. But that's those are the numbers that we're then looking at. There are other costs too that are not captured here, but which are also substantial. These link to line closures. So in several examples, we see that lines need to be closed for several weeks, but these are the full closures. Already before that, these are like partial hindrances that are being experienced during the reconversion project, which can last for a long period of time. Final argument that we also want to reflect upon is the feasibility. So even if it will be technical feasible, you also have the question about the workshop capacities, the personnel that's needed, and also the financial feasibility of having this resources available to invest in line re-electrification in view of also other investment needs, such as ERTMS and FRMCS. So these are the numbers that we can look at if it was decided to move to re-electrification on the European level. And these are just part of the numbers, as I say, the many numbers which are even more difficult to quantify. So you see, what would there then still be benefits of doing so? Well, one of the benefits that's often mentioned about re-electrification of lines is that it would improve the energy efficiency, and that can be confirmed in many cases. 25 kV is in general more efficient than 1.5 kV and 3 kV DC. That said, it also depends on the let's say on the network usage, the traffic profile of the lines that exists. And at the same time, we also see that energy efficiency improvements are also occurring on those systems. On the European level, moreover, as you see on the top, there is also a general evolution that railways become more energy efficient due to several innovations like regenerative braking. You also see that a more modern rolling stock is also being more energy efficient. So even when the train kilometers increase, the energy consumption does not necessarily so. And we also see that the amount of fossil fuels that are being consumed also decreases substantially. Another point is the costs of the vehicle. And I think there, and what the benefits of the RUs can be. And again, this is a tricky question because it depends how you look. So on the international level, for international freight operations, it can be said to have a single or bi-system locomotive, AC only or DC only, is cheaper than a multi-system locomotive. So in terms of purchase cost, CapEx and OpEx, this would be cheaper. But if you would then adjust lines within a country, it might imply that in order to cross lines, the existing single system fleet would need to be adjusted to run on the lines, also become bi-system. And in this migration period, that also can increase costs rather than decrease them. So that also makes it difficult to answer if re-electrification will be beneficial for Europe as a whole, because there also will be additional costs during the migration phase, even for our use. So yes, that is what brings us to the conclusion that the benefits or costs really need to be assessed on a case-by-case basis with understanding of the fleet, both the domestic operations and the current and potential future demands for international operations, and the situation on the infrastructure side. we are convinced that a case-by-case analysis is needed to come to an appropriate assessment of the benefits and costs of re-electrification. Now, allow me also to address a few other points, because, as said, the focus of the study was on the harmonization of electrification systems. But while working on the study, we also found that there are many points of the electrification system, on the energy system, where interoperability barriers are experienced and that need to be addressed. And say also in discussion with the Commission, we decided to also touch upon those points within the study to give an indication of where those interoperability barriers are still experienced. One of the points relates to the non-electrified border sections. And we see that not in all cases there is an economic sense to electrify lines or to electrify some border sections. There can be alternative solutions thought of, partial electrification, battery trains, other solutions. But we also see that even on the 10T main corridors, there are border crossings that are not electrified. They're being shown here. So here we only focus upon on the core corridors, but on the comprehensive network, there are many more of those border crossings. So I think that even this picture might even give still a too positive picture on the state of play. As you saw before, there's a very large number of border crossings across the European Union that are not electrified. Another point has to do with the other parameters of the energy subsystem. So we see that voltage is only but one of the barriers. There are several specific cases still in place, 24 to be exact, which have like an undefined application or permanent application. And what you see on the right side are those specific cases and the year till which they are valid. And you see that quite a few have a validity till 2035. But even afterwards, there are several which have still an to be determined validity. And we also see that they do have real world implications, particularly on rolling stock design, that need to be better considered. The same also applies for the national rules that are still in place on the pantograph requirements and the contact strips. So we also see that these are barriers to interoperability that also deserve attention to be addressed. To focus on the pantograph compatibility, and this is feedback that we got of many of the respondents, there is also here quite a bit of a patchwork. And you see that Europe evolved gradually towards the 1950 and 1600 standards. But there's still quite a few networks where there are lines that are 1450 compatible or where only operations with 1450 can occur. I only show here the countries for which data could be found within RINF, but we also know, and this is linked to the specific cases, that a few countries give the possibility or mandate the fitting of the 1450 pantographs, and that's one of the reasons why on the rolling stock we see combinations of 1450, 1600, and 1950 pantographs, which comes with additional complications. So then, moving to the recommendations, and these are the recommendations that we formulate based upon our analysis. First of all, as said, we do not see a possibility for an absolute requirement for re-electrification from 1.5 kV, 3 kV, so from the DC systems to AC. We do not see an economic feasibility nor a strong operational need for a blanket requirement for re-electrification. We do see, however, that there is an increase of AC lines throughout Europe, particularly for AC lines. That is also mandated by the TSI already since the earlier versions, that new high-speed lines are AC. And we also see, therefore, that AC lines are introduced in countries and that increasing number of lines is AC. That also makes it, in some cases, a relatively small DC section exists along AC lines. Now, looking also at the re-electrification projects that we see across Europe, we do think it is worthwhile to see which instruments and which requirements could facilitate also this transition, so that if you have an AC corridor and a small DC section, to also facilitate the reconversion to AC, where this would make sense also from an operational perspective. Lastly, under this point, we also believe that it's beneficial to look at those cross-border sections and see where alternative electrification solutions could be beneficial, or where it would be beneficial to extend the voltage of one country to a border station to facilitate cross-border operations in that way. So these are the recommendations that we have on re-electrification. Now, on other energy subsystem requirements, maybe to start with the first point, we still have a partial insight on TSI compliance of the fixed installations of TSI compliance of fixed installations in Europe. I think this is also a knowledge gap which we need to acknowledge. So one of the recommendations is that we propose to monitor the level of compliance of the energy subsystem, including evaluation of existing tracks, because after upgrades and renewal, we see that the TSI compliance is also partial, and we need to have a better understanding of that. Second point is linked to the OCL geometries. We believe that a study on this specific topic really would pay off, and particularly when focusing upon the impact of the 1450 pantograph requirements. Finally, we also believe that for these specific cases in TSI energy and local paths, it is beneficial to look at their impact on interoperability and duration. Last point is relating to high-speed rail. There we see that the recently launched high-speed rail plan also focus upon interoperability of rolling stock and of infrastructure, and we believe it would pay off to conduct an analysis whether there's a feasible path towards simplifying the energy subsystem requirements, both on the infrastructure side by investments on the infrastructure, or by evaluating the needs and options for multi-system high-speed train sets. Because as you saw in the analysis on the high-speed train set side, there are substantially fewer multi-system vehicles than what we see on the locomotive side. And we believe that an additional study on this point would pay off. That said, this was the last slide of the study. So thanks everybody for the attention. I hope I made it clear. I see that Giacomo came to sit next to me, so I'm quite sure you want to share something.
Yes, just a technical walk around due to network issues that we experience. In order to ask questions, we are now moving to the item for the Q&A for the study number 2. You may raise the hand in Teams. A message may appear, sort of question, and you can push the button, keep your hand raised, and you will be given the floor from serial one after the other. Alternatively, you can also type questions in the Q&A channel, which is available and open to all participants. For the participants here in the room, we will repeat the questions from the speaker, given that the room should be fixed during the coffee break. It is not yet operational. Thank you. So we can now open the floor for questions.
Hugo, I think will we try to see if your voice can reach the Jabber?
Hello, everyone.
Please, people
just
online,
make a
can you
test.
give an indication if you can hear Hugo? And Hugo, sorry to ask, but if you can speak loud.
Yes, can you hear me now? Yes. I'm Hugo Tembret from UNIFE, European Rail Supply Industry Association. So I've got two questions or remarks. The first one on the cost-benefit analysis of switching from a system to another in the long term. Because in the long term, I imagine it might be more beneficial to have one system instead than another, and especially when you are renovating a line. You would think that it's a good opportunity to switch from one system to another. We know that there are a lot of infrastructure work at the moment, especially in Germany and Italy. And for instance, when we look at the 25 kV, I think it needs less substations on the infrastructure, and also we've got the possibility to re-inject the energy on the network, which can be interested with the current topic of flexibility we need with renewable energy, by the way. So I just wanted to know if this aspect of the long-term benefits of switching from one system to another had been covered in the study. So this was my first point, and my second point, which is more of a comment about the multi-system locomotive. So it's true that it's great to have the multi-system locomotive to be able to go from one side of Europe to another. But we've got to keep in mind that it's not the only panacea or the perfect solution, because we know that in multi-system locomotive we've got to introduce first the possibility to be supplied by different electrical systems. But we've got also, if we want to go to other countries, to have the alternative signaling systems. And we're going to adapt also to the train detection system and so on. So it is indeed the best option that we have, but we need to keep in mind also that it can come with some drawbacks, because when the locomotives are too packed with too much systems to comply to the different networks, then it's more complicated to integrate new technologies or to integrate some innovation to this type of product. This was more.
So thank you, Hugo. So let me repeat the questions to make sure that answered correctly, and that the online audience can also fully heard it. So the first question was on whether the analysis also considered that now there are many upgrades happening across Europe, and also that 25 kV has substantial benefits, and whether the long-term benefits have been considered also, or switching to say a target system. And for the multiple system locomotives, whether it also was considered that this solution comes also with several complications, also with upgrading it for other systems, and that multi-system locomotive is also not the ideal solution also from the supply industry point of view.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good solution to have multi-system locomotives, of course, but just we need to keep in mind that it can come with drawbacks in the future if we want to integrate new technologies, for instance, in locomotives which are already quite packed.
Yeah. So indeed. So on the long-term benefits, if they have been considered, yes. Look, we also see that there can be benefits for countries to re-electrify their lines, to upgrade their lines to 25 kV. But the lines that can be re-electrified depend very much also on where the line is positioned in the overall network, what the implications are also for upgrading the fleet, for also purchasing new vehicles. And we see that in order to make those decisions, there's a 10-20-year plan that needs to be assessed before such a, let's say, re-electrification actually happens. We said it happened in all the projects that we have observed. So from the European perspective, where the instruments to support this evolution are rather limited, and we mainly focus now on the TSIs, we see that this actually can be quite dangerous, because if a line will be upgraded and you would impose 25 kV, it might be that upgrades don't happen because the risk or the operational consequences are too substantial. And it also might fragment the network even more. So we see the benefits. We see the cases where it happens, that there were in several cases positive consequences, but we do not see that on the European level with the TSIs, this is the appropriate instrument to enforce this. At the same time, we also see across Europe, as said, like an increased number of AC lines, and sometimes there's a small DC section on the predominantly AC corridor. There we say it can be evaluated and should be promoted to have this evaluation, both on domestic traffic and on international traffic, whether it makes sense to move towards an AC-only corridor. Now, this also then links to your second question for multi-system locomotives. If the corridors could increasingly move towards AC, you see a simplification on the rolling stock side. Because if you can reach major points with AC only, and then I assume that in most cases it will be 25 kV and 15 kV, you already have a simplification. The total move from 15 kV to 25 kV, also given the already say performance characteristics of that 15 kV network, and also the size of the 15 kV network to 25 kC, and also what we understood from the inputs that we received, the assessment of the lack of a need for any reconversion, we don't see. So I think that on the rolling stock side, AC only locomotives for those corridors would then be the, say, achievable simplification in some cases.
To complement what you are explaining, it's only to complement what Michael explained about these long-term benefits. We are here focused on the re-electrification, so the change of the voltage, let's say. But even with that, even in these long-term benefits, we need to take into account that maybe this couldn't be sufficient because of the pantograph gauge. This is not part. I mean, we enter in. You will see when the study is published. It was not in the court of the study, but we tackle with that. There is the need in order to avoid this, or that the rolling stock get benefits about the harmonization. We need not only to harmonize the voltage, but also the pantograph gauge, which adds another level of complexity to justify all these, let's say, works at the level of the infrastructure, at the subsystem level, the energy subsystem, not only the power supply, but also the OCL, which is related to the pantograph gauge. Only to complement that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Esteban. Sorry. Do we do the questions first in the room and then online?
We can do, yes, of
Yes.
course.
Introduce themselves because online they can.
Yes, exactly. Good point. So I don't know who was first, Carol.
Okay, so we will take a few questions from the meeting room after the questions from Unife. Now a question from Carol Kuhn.
I'm a little bit surprised by the statement regarding the complexity to add different signaling system or innovation to a multi-system locomotive, because as you probably know, the leasing companies are funding a lot of multi-system locomotives. I haven't heard about such a complexity to add signaling system. Of course, we are complaining about too much signaling systems in Europe, but the TNT regulation has solved the problem. We are going for just one ERTMS system in Europe. So from our point of view, there is no problem with this multi-system logo. Short.
Thank you. So I can repeat. So for those who might not have fully got it online, so Karul Koen from Earl from the Ron Stocklessers indicated that she's surprised to hear about the complications of adding multiple train protection systems, and mostly also because we anyway move towards a single European system, ERTMS. So from Earl's point of view, that is not too much of an issue. Please.
Yes, Laurent Projet from UIC. Thank you, Michel, for your explanations. It was very clear. So I have perhaps 3 comments. First of all, I would like to say that UIC was very happy to have contributed to this study led by the agency. And because, as you know, we worked closely with different infrastructure managers, so Abel, Adif, Electrification, and also Huawei. And we are very happy that our recommendations were taken into account, and so we fully agree with your conclusions. So first comment, we do think that the approach to evaluating CapEx and OpEx provides a solid framework to take the good decisions. And as you know, the OpEx is very low on the DC and AC system, so we have also to take into account. Second one, and I think it's interesting to add it if possible on this report or to discuss on it, but there is possibilities of improving DC system. So we do think that the DC electrification has a future, and it is also possible when upgrading to improve the efficiency of DC system. And third point, I think we all agree here and online that DC is limited by its low voltage, and so which results with higher currents. But switching from DC to AC, according to us, is only justified when we have new electrification or when we want to have high-speed train. Okay. So only justified in few cases, and so we could agree with your conclusion, and we do think that DC electrification, both 1.5 and 3 kV, they have a future.
Okay. Thank you very much. So you heard Laurent from UIC indicating that the approach to evaluate the topics from OPEX, CAPEX framework is indeed the perspective to follow. That DC systems have a future, and that also improvements can be made to improve their energy efficiency, and that also from UIC's point of view, switching from DC to AC is only justified in limited cases. Thank you. Are there other?
Yes, Paul Tobak from Infrabel, but also representing EIM, so European Infrastructure Managers. I have 3 or maybe 4 small comments. So we dressed up a command sheet as C or EIM, a common position. And one of the comments, we have a Norwegian study.
Yes.
We got it so to switch from 15 kV in Scandinavia to 25,
yes,
which was not on the list. So they eventually concluded that it would not be worthwhile. Secondly, within our energy working group, also from the people from ProRail and French colleagues, we received the basic comment that 25 kV system is the most efficient system because the voltage is so high, and your energy cost, your marginal energy cost is the most efficient system. But to get so you will reduce, and that's the reasoning behind, you will reduce CO2 emissions by having that system. But the step towards that system might increase enormously your CO2 emissions because you need to replace a lot of hardware on the infrastructure side and on the rolling stock side. This is something that we felt was not addressed, it's not focused in the study. And as a last part, so you mentioned it in the presentations, but is the alternative propulsion systems like battery trains and so on. This is something new. So there are a lot of slides about the rolling stock and what kind of rolling stock we have, but it does not indicate which rolling stock has batteries on board, and especially for cross-border, like short cross-border, I would say, short cross-border operations. This could be a solution. And then I would like to comment a last thing on what Esteban mentioned about the pantographs. It's not only about the voltage and the frequency, also the pantographs, and it's not only the gauge. Yes, I do not want to criticize German colleagues, but we are re-electrifying. They are re-electrifying a lot because there is a lot of electrification from the 1950s, not even the 1960s, 1950s, which needs urgent replacement. But the re-electrification only takes into account the 1950 pantograph because it's, from an infrastructure manager side, it's cheaper. If they want to take into account the Euro pantograph 1600, then we need to reduce pole spacing by from a maximum of 80 meters on a straight line to 56 meters on a straight line. So I calculate in my head the percentage of how much it would cost more on the infrastructure side. But this is also something to keep in mind, not only the voltages. And that's it.
Okay. One small add-on on the CO2 emissions. Also by running a long period with multi-traction systems in a migration will even increase the CO2 emissions during 20, 30 years. Less not only looking on the CapEx, but also on the OpEx, because you have more mass to transport.
Yeah. So thank you very much. So let me indeed repeat the questions again. The first point was on the Norwegian study, where they also assessed the migration impacts from 15 kV to 25 kV. That study has been received, has been also included in the study. Many thanks for that, for sharing that information. Then secondly, the point was on the, could I have your charger, please? So the second point was on the 25 kV system and the CO2 emissions. That is indeed the case. That is the most energy efficient system. However, getting to that situation will also imply CO2 emissions during migration step, both in terms of the operations with bimode systems, but also the investments in the infrastructure, say the works on the infrastructure, which also have an environmental impact. You're right. That also needs to be considered to have like let's say complete picture on the environmental impact. So if we only talk about the benefits, also the investments in the construction phase, the migration phase also need to be fairly assessed. Then on the rolling stock with batteries on board, it's a bit of a tricky question because the information on the number of vehicles with batteries on board is a bit patchy, and so it's difficult. It's also hard to follow. We made an attempt last year. We also know that a few more vehicles have entered into service, have come on the market, but the number of vehicles to assess that appropriately, I think it will be difficult. But the point that battery vehicles can in certain cases be a better solution, that has been acknowledged. Finally, on the pantographs, would you like to?
Yes, I can say on pantographs. Thank you for the comment, because thank you, Paul. And indeed, even if it's not, even if it's not really in the core of the study, because the study was harmonization of electrification systems, we tackle with that. We were analyzing in deep this kind of migration from OCLs in 1950 to also to accept 1600. On the contrary, also with the specific case, the famous 1450. I mean, it's not shown in the slides because we cannot pollute the core of the study. And the study you will see when it's published that we tackle with that with more details. Even we could decide to release more data, but indeed is like that. There is a point of this 1450, this specific case in some countries, and also the point of that the 1950 is cheaper, and there is the temptation to continue with this and not focusing in this European target system that is the 1600. Then but is an open debate, maybe for a future study. We don't know. We will tackle in the recommendations in the future studies that Michel explained very well. There is this. We need to compare the cost of the migrating to forcing the currently OCLs in 1600 to accept pantographs of 1950, which is not in line with this the target system, or also doing something maybe at the level of the TSI requirements. We don't know. This is very preliminary in order to enable OCLs 1950 to accept the Europantograph in 1600 in order to make these modifications and to extend the use of the 1600. For high-speed new lines, it's okay. It's already in the TSI, but for the speeds below 160, this maybe failed to work, and also for upgrading and renewal of lines, whenever they are renewed or upgraded, try to split the use of the 1600. This is also needs, of course, again, it's not in the core of the study. It needs more economic evaluation, because it's really this has a really important economic cost, but we already envisage that. We are already reflecting on that. So thank you for your comment. In the study, maybe we could dig a bit when it's published, and because with Eva, but thank you, Eva. We were really working a lot on this point of the possibility to what would be the cost between 1600 and 1950. So really, we are dealing with that. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul, Esteban. Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. So
just to complement, just to note that even with DC system, we are going to run up to 220 kilometers in France, for instance. Italy, near Firenze, it is up to 250 kilometers. So when you want high-speed train, 300 and more, AC is, I think, is justified. But even with high speed in France, Italy, or other countries, we can operate with high speed on the DC system. So you have two examples. So
no, it's and indeed this, if the recommendation on this future study is becoming a reality, we will need your feedback in order, because this is for proper an impact assessment, economic evaluation. We need to tackle, even if it's a possibility, we need really data on the money to show how to justify that in short terms. Two small comments. One first thing, maybe because on your nice maps, there's a blind spot which is called Switzerland, and we have also on the pantographs, the old Swiss tunnels do not even allow the 1600 pantograph, and this is on a few European corridors. Okay, we are investing in Belgium, which is on the Mediterranean, so North Sea Mediterranean corridor, and this pantograph issue is a big issue. Yeah. That's the first point I want to make, and the second one is on the corridors, to have complete 25 kV high-speed corridors, for example. I repeat the Belgian decision from the 1990s or even the 1980s. I can't remember it because I was too young. But we decided to have the high-speed node in Brussels, which was not the original idea. You must recall it. It was not the original idea to have the split towards the Netherlands and Germany in Brussels. Yes, but this means the network density is so big. You have so a big number of trains and domestic trains that use the 3 kV.
Yep.
That at that time we decided to stop the 25 kV outside of Brussels. Yes, so this has been a basic decision, and it's the same thing as we have now discussed. Can we have a 25 kV corridor all along? For example, in this case, because it's such a dense node, it will never happen.
So to repeat the question, so the first point was on Switzerland and the maps. Yes, we are aware the Swiss data is missing. We also were in contact with the Swiss colleagues to also transfer the data and to resolve this. But we are aware that there we also have the lines where the 4050 is the most critical, and that has the biggest impact upon the pantograph requirements for the new vehicles. Then on the high-speed corridors in the Belgian situation, where it was decided when developing the high-speed corridors not to move the lines within the Brussels node, but also in Antwerp, also in Liège, to 25 kV, because of the density of the traffic, of the domestic traffic, and the structures, the difficulties with adapting the structures. That was why it was not decided to move to stretch 25 kV throughout Brussels, and that this also will not happen because of the complexities with moving this entire system to 25 kV.
Yeah. And because of let's say usage of the lines.
Yeah.
So we did not create, like the Japanese, if I'm not mistaken, because I do not know, a separate network. It's not a separate network. The political decision at the time was that, okay, we have the high-speed project, the 10 corridors, 10T corridors. How can we benefit, make the domestic trains benefit from that project?
Yeah.
And so
you have like different considerations, like also in Spain, you see like a parallel network.
It's not, yeah, in Belgium we do, so it's not a technical decision. It's a decision about how to use the trains that we are going to build and the networks that we are going to build. And so to upgrade the dense network to Brussels and upgrade it in 3 kV, increase double the number of tracks because of the high-speed network and network, and so to have a more domestic usage of the network.
Yeah, but I think like those considerations also within the high-speed rail plan are also essential. Like, how do you see this? Do you see that you have like a mixed traffic, domestic, international high speeds, or do you see a separation of the high-speed network with simplification on the infrastructure side, simplification on the rolling stock side, but as a consequence that you have a separate system, and how feasible that is? I think those are the questions that need to be addressed also in other parts of Europe.
And indeed, 10 seconds, because we have more questions. This leads the 1450, this specific case, is another reason to boost OCLs with 1600, because an OCL for 1600 needs some modifications, but okay, there are some questions. Also, we tackled with that in the investigation, in the research for the study, but could have set pantographs with 1450 under certain circumstances, but with OCLs 1950 is more difficult. So we have seen countries they have the 1600 OCL running with pantographs of 1450 for this specific case, because indeed it's a requirement. It's a huge requirement. We are crossing center of Europe. Even we have seen cases when the manufacturer decided only to put the pantograph 1450 directly to go to solve this technical question, because again, the problem for the manufacturer was not the voltage. For then they can multi-voltage. The main sometimes technical problem for the pantograph, the barrier from the point of view of the rolling stock is the pantograph. So thank you, Paul, because this also leads to also to be considered in the eventual future study for the in the recommendations we addressed in this study. Thank you.
Thank you all. I think like if there are not any questions from the room, let us move to also the Q&A, the online questions that have been asked. I see there have been several questions asked by Ivan Beltramba. Please, if you would like to take the words, I think we can give you the right to speak if you would like to. Otherwise,
please raise the hand in case, and also any other online participants who would like to ask questions, please raise your hand in Teams.
If not raising the hand, maybe I can read the question and give a response to this. So there's firstly, say the energy efficiency of the low voltage versus the high voltage systems. Yeah, I think we touched upon this in the previous question in the room already. Yes, this is to be acknowledged. So the 25 kV system is as a whole better energy efficiency than the DC systems. The actual performance depends a lot on the operational characteristics of the network, but that's one part. So yes, I see. Please read my question. Sure, will do. Then regarding the point on the conversion of 25 kV LUX EMUs seems to be very cheap versus the conversion of 1.5 kV and 3 kV. We should highlight the difference. And this is also like a point where I would like to ask both online participants and here if more information can be shared on this, on the cost of any conversion. As said, we do have examples of the conversion of 3 kV to 25 kV, 15 kV to 25 kV conversion. I'm not aware if this has ever happened. I know that vehicles have been produced as such, like as bi-mode, but the conversion retrofit of those vehicles to have an estimate even on these costs, I don't know. I think we didn't find this. Mm-hmm. So if there's any information on this, also to substantiate that further, that will be very much valued. On the ice on the wires with 25 kV systems, you can shortcut the overhead for a few minutes to warm them up and eliminate the ice formation. Exactly, that's a technical benefit of the 25 kV system, which certainly in several climates is of relevance. That needs to be acknowledged as well. So again, like with this study, we do not put such arguments in favor of a system in question. So they can be acknowledged, and the relevance of those arguments depends upon the situation in which it is. The only thing that we wanted to express is that from a European perspective, we do not see the instruments or the possibility to have an absolute requirement to move towards 25 kV for this and for other potential benefits, because the costs can be substantial and need to be and before the benefits really can materialize, a well thought through plan needs to be put in place. So I hope that makes that clear. Let me see if there are any other questions. So
maybe in terms of for the 15 kilovolts, but at the end, the question of the migration, normally we have seen in the balance and in the weight, I mean, in the weighting elements in the cost is more related to electrification of 1.5, 3 kilovolts lines, mainly the migration. In terms of cost, the most complex one is when you have to electrify from 1.5, 3 kilovolts to 25, from 15 kilovolts to 25, because 10 kilovolts is very specific in the area of use.
Yeah, well, for the 15 kV, you also have the adaptations to the grid and the existing power supply, which also have like substantial consequences. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but indeed, like in the study, we also address like the benefits, the pros, the challenges, and the benefits of each type of conversion. Maybe one more question that I see here. It will be interesting, this question by Tobias Gras. It will be interesting to have a view on the mileage of each vehicle in Europe. My assumption is that there are many of the one system units from TUs from 1960s to 1980s and are not used most of the time. I fully agree. I will be extremely happy if we would have a better view on the usage of vehicles in Europe, and I really hope that this will be possible in a not too long, say in a not too long future. For the time being, we do not know, and that's also one of the reasons why in the assessments of the energy usage, we also need to make like a quite crude assumptions. But indeed, if better understanding about the actual operational usage of vehicles and to also understand which vehicles are being used in Europe of all that are registered, I think would benefit any type of analysis, any type of decision making greatly. So, very fair point. Okay,
It might be possible, but I don't know anyone already has it in big data environments, but having the train run data, making a jump already to the additional study 03, but if you have train run data from the telematics TSI and you merge that with the energy metering data, you have even consumption and kilometers and masses. But the problem is also those big data environments have not yet developed in most. We have done some studies already on our side, but we have a lot to investigate. But the data itself could be available.
Right. So but from Infrabel raised the point that the issue, let's say, of monitoring this, let's say, exists, but the data can be available. In principle, should be available also under the telematics TSI. We agree, and we also see evolutions, positive evolutions. We also see tests being created in this field. So, as said, I hope that in a not too distant future, we can come up with more accurate assessments of the actual operational of the European fleet.
Indeed, knowing where trains run, it's a fundamental point for any type of analysis in our sector. There are no more questions, so I suggest we break now for coffee. Back at 11. Thank you very much. Welcome back. We are continuing the workshop. We now move according to our program to item number 5, the presentation of the study number 3. So the study additional study number 3 had a specific objective, part of the European Commission request. Three objectives. One of them was to evaluate the state of play of data collecting systems DCS on ground as they are defined in TSI energy, and to assess issues affecting energy metering in railways, because there was already understanding that energy metering is not working as it should be everywhere in the member states. And so part of the objective was to analyze the problems for implementers of DCS on ground, but obviously we can't speak of energy metering without the onboard part, and so also focus of our research about energy metering systems on board. Then we wanted to understand if there are national rules or infrastructure manager requirements from other parties related to energy metering. In some countries, this is the case, that impact the interoperability and the free choice of energy supplier for railway undertakings. Then assess the problems for the metering data exchange itself and settlement, and any technical or authorization hurdles, both on ground and on board. And as we heard earlier for the study number 2, provide to the some recommendations to the Commission on the identified challenges. As a methodology, the project ran from the beginning of this year until now, where we performed desk research, a large web survey of all relevant stakeholders that are involved in energy metering. So we have been addressing the European scale, and thanks also to the support and the help of the European trade associations that supported the dispatch of our survey and also of UAC and ERES, we reached hopefully the appropriate experts to reply to our survey from RUs, IMs, NSA, member states authorities, manufacturers, suppliers of EMS and DCS, lessors, NOBO and DEBO. We got more than 80 detailed replies, which doesn't look a very big number, but our survey was very complex and very detailed in terms of questions. After the survey, we had, which ended in the beginning of the summer, and we gave a presentation of the results at the ERES forum in June. We then held 38 bilateral interviews with many of the stakeholders that we have interviewed across different stakeholder groups. And these interviews, we are happy, gave us a very good coverage of the EU. So we could speak with stakeholders based in almost all member states. We also attended UIC and Europe Sale joint undertaking events and workshops related to energy metering in order to exchange with the participants and also keep the sector up to date with our study progress. For this study, we had a collaboration as advisor with ERES, with UIC, with the System Pillar Task 1 of Europe's Rail Joint Undertaking, and with the Sensenelec. All of these organizations are having parallel work streams around energy metering. Therefore, it was very useful, their advice. We then, as I said at the beginning of the workshop, similarly to the study number 2, we shared the detailed draft final report with the contributors and the people that we have interviewed, as well as formally through our economic steering group, where trade associations at European level are represented. We received more than 180 comments that we are still analyzing, and we are happy to debate on some of them today through the questions. This will end with our own independent analysis and the drafting of recommendations, for which today you will get a preview. Because energy metering is a very niche business in the railway sector and quite technical and complex, I will give maybe for those who are not so familiar with energy metering, a short explanation of what it is and how it works. So why it matters to meter traction energy. So about 58% of the network in Europe is electrified. So it doesn't look a very huge number. However, 90% of the traffic runs on electric lines, meaning that the part of the network which is not electrified, is primarily diesel traction, is not so relevant in terms of train kilometers. Traction energy accounts for 87% of the entire rail sector electricity consumption. That's pretty self-evident because trains are very heavy assets to pull. However, energy is a key cost driver for rail undertakings. And rail undertakings and the rail sector as a whole is a major consumer of electricity. In certain countries, it's even the number one among all industries that consume electricity. The use of the catenary or the overhead contact lines, and optionally also the provision of traction current, is part of the minimum access package that infrastructure managers have to provide to railway undertakings as per the Directive 2012/34 on the rail market, also known as the recast directive. Historically, traction energy has been built according to estimations of consumption. This approach entails that energy providers or suppliers or IMs themselves tend to overestimate the real consumption in order to protect their balance sheet from losses. It's an obvious effect. At the same time, building based on estimations gives no incentives to railway undertakings to be energy efficient, because they pay the same regardless how their operations are, their driving style is, or the vehicle is efficient. And therefore, RUs don't have an incentive to request from suppliers more light or energy efficient vehicles. And therefore, as a result, the overall consumption of railways is higher than it could be. The OPEX of railway undertakings are not optimized, and as in many of these estimations, the real train weight is not always considered, and especially comparing freight trains with freight trains, sometimes estimations don't go deeper than that, and therefore you may have a very heavy train transporting iron ore bulk paying the same as an intermodal train carrying containers, which is much lighter. What is an EMS and why energy metering then? So energy metering systems, in brief, are a digital meter like the one in your houses installed on board a traction vehicle. It is able, in brief, to transmit the position of the train with GPS coordinates and, of course, the consumption data. Meters on trains are not something very new. Some member states introduced them more than 30 years ago. I think Germany was a frontrunner historically. At EU level, legislation started in 2007 with the first recommendation. And since 2014, energy metering systems on board are mandatory for new or modified vehicles as per the Lock and Pass TSI, which is our legislation for vehicles. In 2020, the rail sector, given the developments of the onboard metering installation, made a specific declaration signed by many associations, including most of those around the event today, with commitments for energy metering. So the sector committed to organize itself in a certain way. Billing based on meter consumption allows clearly fairer invoices. You pay what you use. Incentives, as I said, on the opposite side for railway undertakings to minimize their energy consumption, because they will pay what they consume. And this gives especially a key incentive to eco-driving. So the braking curve of trains is optimized, and the driver style is incentivized to be as efficient as possible. Also, the purchase of lighter and more aerodynamic vehicles is a clear incentive, and overall consumption can reduce. Another element is a very important aspect of energy efficiency in railways is regenerative braking, which allows the recuperation of energy with an impact on the bills, obviously. Then another point is the access to the liberalized energy supply market by the EU, with the option for those undertakings that want to choose green-only energy sourcing. Like you do in your house, you can, if you wish, choose this, and this has also an impact on ESG standards of companies. Also, railway undertakings especially can use financial instruments to cover the risk of energy price volatility or achieve volume discounts with suppliers or off-peak time discounts, especially important for freight trains that run mostly at night, which is when suppliers may give a better price. One problem, trains are moving, so they're not like your house. The meter stays there and it's counting how much electricity you consume. They're moving around, and therefore the consumption point, which is an important aspect for the energy industry, is a movable one, and is moving also in case of cross-border trains from one IM to another, from one grid to another, or even multiple grids within the same country. So this makes the whole metering extremely complex. This is why we need and has been implemented data collecting systems on ground, which are the receivers of the data from the onboard meters. Then a separate business is the exchange function and settlement systems, which are also required in TSI Energy since 2020, in order to allow the data flow and the settlement. I will go in more detail on that. TSI Energy today provides some basic requirements for the DCS. So it says, in a nutshell, that member states shall have a DCS. Doesn't say much more than that. For the data and the onboard meters, there is a standard from Senelec EN 50463. We will go in more detail on that, which since many years is the reference point for energy metering systems on board. For the ground and for the exchange and settlement functions today, the sector, those who are using DCS and have meters, are relying on UIC, which has IRS 90930 as the data model for data exchange and settlement, which is the dialogue between DCS systems. Go visually to understand how it works. The data flow. Relevant undertakings, or let's say vehicle keeper, or in case of lease vehicles, in any way it's relevant undertakings using them, have each of them a European vehicle number, which is the vehicle registration. This is an important point. I'll come back in a second. Each train has hopefully one, sometimes unfortunately more than one, EMS on board, hopefully compliant with the EN standard. The meter on board sends every 5 minutes compiled energy billing data to the DCS on the ground, containing consumption data, GPS position, the EVN of the vehicle, the registration, through the mobile network. This is a simplification. Of course, data are more complex. The DCS is the receiver of this data, and it's usually, but not everywhere, owned by a national infrastructure manager. The DCS then is exchanging the data that received from the meters with an exchange system. And here you see we are outside the blue box, so we are outside of the current scope of TSI Ene. TSI Ene today regulates very basic requirements and a very small scope. We go then in the IRS framework, where through this voluntary data model and scheme at UIC, the sector is exchanging the data in exchange systems. So there is a data quality check, and especially the allocation of the consumption to different settlement systems, which is where the consumption took place, depending where the train has run. This is very important for cross-border trains. Settlement systems and exchange systems, of course, have a very important function, which is the matching, meaning that the consumption data that are received needs to be matched with the user of a specific vehicle, which is the user on the specific day on a specific train. Most infrastructure managers, they use train composition data that they receive anyway from relevant undertakings, including the EVN of the vehicles that run on the network, for other safety and operations and business-to-business communication, which is usually in the form of so-called TAP TSI messages. And then the infrastructure managers provide the settlement systems, sometimes it's the same company doing the two, the data to allow the matching between how much consumption has been registered by a specific vehicle with specific EVN, knowing who has been running that vehicle, meaning to whom the invoice should go for the traction energy. You see a dotted box of train composition data, because today this is not still right now as we speak, not mandatory to use TAP messages or data. This will change in the near future, because the new TSI telematics, which has been voted positively a couple of weeks ago by the member states, will replace TAP and TAP, and will have the requirement of the usage of this composition data also for energy metering. Then the infrastructure manager is also having a role in metering and in billing because it's providing the catenary. And so, as we said before, part of the minimum access package. So the kilowatt hour data that are either sent directly from the settlement systems to the energy market supplier or through the infrastructure manager, depending on contractual arrangements. The IAM, in fact, can be a mere pass-through, a mere distributor, or in some countries is a group purchaser. So it is buying the energy from the supply market at the benefit of all undertakings. At the end of the process, back up of the chart, the undertaking receives an invoice, which is the kilowatt hour that has been consumed, plus the grid fee, plus the cost for the catenary usage. We move now to the key findings, the state of play, so the first objective. DCS today are implemented by infrastructure managers. There are three notable exceptions, France, Germany, and Poland, where a different company has been entrusted to be a DCS exchange function settlement system. In the case of France, is the transmission system operator of the high voltage, RTE. In the case of Germany, is DB Energie, which is a subsidiary of DB Group, but separate from DB Infrago. In case of Poland, also is the TSO. Some IAMs share the data exchange function through ERES, which is an association of IAMs that cooperate for the exchange function and settlement. What is interesting on the map? One finding is that today, in blue, is the member states where, at least on the national infrastructure manager's point of view, there are some smaller ones that are probably not having a DCS. We have in blue the countries where data exchange cross-border works, and there is a DCS. Then we have in yellow countries that have a DCS, so they have the ability to receive the consumption data, but they have either no cross-border data exchange, so the metering is used only for domestic trains, or limited cross-border data exchange, only bilaterals with certain networks. Then in Portugal, implementation of DCS is in process, but most worryingly, in the countries in red, DCS is not present. So it is not in line with the requirement of TSI-NA. Another key finding, third-party access. So as you can see on the map, there is a free supplier choice only in the member states in blue. In the member states in red, there is not, with some justifications or exceptions. So in some countries, there is a national law that mandates the IAM being the only energy provider for element undertakings. In some countries, the choice of supplier is only for domestic trains again. In the Netherlands, since 2008, there is Vivens, which is a cooperative or a purchasing group set up by the IAM, where all our users are connected in order to receive electricity. The Netherlands, we understand, will move as of 2028 to allow also free choice of supplier. In Belgium, the third-party access is only on paper because at the moment, or so far, no RUs opted for another supplier than using the Infrabel contracts. In Italy, Traction Energy is considered particularly cheap for the DC network due to a government subsidy for historical reasons. I move again to the issues now affecting energy metering. Data quality, data sharing corporate policies affect the ability for the exchange function and to match consumption with tractive vehicle operators. So who is running the vehicle, there are some problems there. Other problems is a difficult EMS certification, authorization, so the onboard part, different IAMs or DCS requiring their own calibration, their own certifications, or even their own seals on the onboard meters, installation, cybersecurity requirements from one to another. And so this makes it very cumbersome to accept data received from different EMS. In the chart, you can see a result of our survey that we presented in June, which you find also available online on the ERAS website. What are the key challenges? You can see a big majority of respondents reported certification, authorization, cost, national rules. Key findings, again, affecting metering. Clearly, as we said before, TSI-N is not applied everywhere as it should be. So DCS are not present in some member states, meaning metering is impossible, exchange of data cross-border not possible. There are different barriers. There is, for our findings, general low knowledge of the legal requirement, because as I said, this is a very niche type of activity in the railway sector. And also some uncertainty regarding the applicable EU legislation affecting the meters or the billing itself in terms of grid fees. Again, from the survey, you can see that awareness, clear energy cost overview, and collecting energy data across border are very difficult as per the red colors. Going to the recommendations, coming to the end of these presentations, this is the list of recommendations that we came up with our study. We will then go in more detail one by one during the Q&A session. One recommendation, obviously, as we said, is to consider to enforce TSI Energy existing requirements. They are there since more than now almost 5 years. They're not applied everywhere. This will allow the benefits of energy metering to materialize across the entire EU. Secondly, consider to make train composition messages from rail telematics a mandatory data flow from rail undertakings to IMs, and allowing also a mandatory data exchange with settlement systems and exchange systems for the sharing of the EVN of tractive vehicles. This will allow a smooth matching of consumption with actual vehicle operator on the specific day. This recommendation has been already fulfilled because, as I said earlier, TSI telematics will soon enter into force and make this exchange possible. Then it's important to improve the dissemination and knowledge sharing, as it is done to some extent. Fourthly, and we will go in more detail in this point, an opportunity to amend Table B1 Appendix B of TSI Energy. It's a very complicated reference, but basically what it means that when there is an authorization of placing into service of fixed installations of a new line or upgraded line, is a responsibility of the National Safety Authority. However, today, the DCS is a not applicable point, which is not assessed by a NOBO. Fifth, analyze the opportunity to extend the scope of application of TSI Energy into the data exchange function and the settlement processes. So what today is, as you may remember from the chart, outside of the blue box, which is left to the voluntary goodwill of the sector, is working to a certain extent, but probably interoperability would improve if there would be some legal references governing this exchange function or the data model, which will also benefit interoperability by minimizing national requirements on data exchange. Sixth is an idea. Today, the TSI Energy requires member states to set up a DCS, and it is worth to consider exploring further costs and benefits of maybe having one DCS or one settlement system at EU level, because in the end, we are speaking of a computer that is receiving and treating data. This may reduce complexity, costs, and especially allow in a more legally sound, safe way, member states to pool or share their responsibility of DCS exchange. Our recommendation number 7 is an opportunity to analyze and further study a possible amendment of TSI lock and pass, making the onboard meters an interoperability constituent, which today they are not. This may facilitate the certification and authorization of vehicles or the reauthorization of vehicles that are being retrofitted when a meter is added, and can also increase competition between EMS suppliers. Recommendation point 8 is regarding an analysis again that could be performed to clarify the applicability of Directive 2014/32 on the measurement instruments. So this is a directive that applies to measurement instruments in general, can be your home meter, but also the scale of your supermarket. We understand there is some misunderstanding, and some additional analysis can bring legal certainty at EU level and can minimize risks of additional assessments and certifications of the rail onboard meters, which the MID would require. Point 9, consider the potential to analyze the need of the legal status of IMs themselves within the split of the energy supply beyond the overhead contact lines, because today we have different legal frameworks and certain decisions which, however, are not very clear at EU level as far as we understood. And this is specifically regarding the setting of grid fees between what is the grid fee of the energy network, which is to be approved by the competent regulator for the energy network, and what is the grid fee and the overhead fee for the rail market, which is having a different legislation and role of the regulator, and often a different regulator. 10, analyze the status of the EMS and the DCS in respect of EU cybersecurity legislation, again, for additional certainty of the framework applicable at EU level. And then point 11, consider some research and development effort on the telecommunication part of the EMS. Because today, the EMS itself has its own antenna in order to transmit consumption data, which is in addition to other antennas that are installed on a train for traffic management system, onboard Wi-Fi for passengers, radio, etc. So this could lower the costs and the complexity of the design of vehicles by reducing the antennas and maybe having the EMS able to use the communication channel of, for example, in the future, FRMCS to send the consumption data to ground. This ends the overview of the study and of the key findings. We will now move right on time to our item number 6. We will have a small panel discussion and a couple of presentations, which will be only an introduction to the Q&A that we are happy to do with the entire audience here in the room and online. So let me introduce first, as I said earlier, Bart van der Spiegel from Infrabel, who is here with me in the room. Dire Martin Gulbrandsen, who is the ARS director, and then, as you heard earlier, my colleague Esteban, who is a subject matter expert at ERA for TSI ENE. Bart is, I would say, very longly engaged in energy metering across his career. He is also today here as the convener of the Senelec Working Group 37, which is in charge of the EN 50463, which is the standard for the onboard meters.
Thank you, Giacomo. First slide is on the level of legislation up to standardization. So on the top are the directives. Below is then the TSI giving more detailed explanation on what is inside the directives. Also mandatory are the parts of the standards that are quoted from the TSI. The EN 5463 is partially, no, all parts are quoted, so all parts have parts that are clauses that are mandatory, but also 3 of them have clauses that can give an assumption, a presumption of conformity. So that is then called harmonized. This is voluntary. but by being compliant to those clauses in the standard, you're also compliant, you're assumed to be compliant with the clauses of the TSI. And then you have all other standards below, which are just voluntary. Next slide. So we are now in a revision phase of this 50463. And this is on the slide, you can see the points that we are adjusting in the 5463, and we want to have a version ready by the end of next year. So we make better distinction between the energy measurement system, and when it's installed on board, then it's called a consumption point. We're introducing multiple changes for hybrid trains. So that can be trains with battery on board or with an onboard source, diesel or hydrogen. Clarifying the process of commissioning new EMS and the maintenance on the consumption point. Introducing the possibility to have an integrated energy measurement function. It's where you have in one device sensors measuring current or voltage and the energy calculation function. Then also improving the test procedure due to user experience. We've had cases where there has been installed a wrong cable between a sensor and a meter, causing there is an additional error on the measurement. So it's clear that the process is not working correctly on such items. So there's also proposals to change the legal framework and to add the design review as part of the legal mandatory verifications. Introduce secure protocols. This is of course linked with the item 10, cybersecurity, the actual one when we drafted the standard in 2017. There was considered that it was not possible to have secure layer protocols for communication from board to ground. But we know by now it's already a long time possible, so we have to update and at least also add those secure protocols. Add the possibility of a direct connection on board. Add a standardized digital signature. It was already possible in the previous one, but it's much more standardized now. Also the uncompressed payloads. We have Heartbeat, which is a very small package, so it's possible now to also have it uncompressed in the messages. And a mechanism for a batch of samplings of a higher frequency. Some countries use very high frequent data transfer inside using the same meter for their more maintenance purposes, or also to know where is the train on the grid located because the GPS has this position. And we try to align as much as possible with the IEC standards. It will be published in parallel on SENELEC level and on IEC level with the same protocol in both cases. It's possible that we have a joint standard in the 2030s, but to be decided, and also to check on other transversal standards. So certainly the electronic equipment on board is not yet transferred to IEC, but also other of such transversal standards has to be first aligned also on the IEC level. Next slide. So on planning, we are now revising the 5463, and we're in the phase of which what is called a PR inquiry. So every national committee can give now comments to the working group, and we will revise them in February, March. We want to be ready by the end of the year, because you will see on a few clicks further that also it's the time that ERA is able to create a proposal of changes to the TSI. So, and if we want ERA to be able to quote to the correct clauses of the EN, we have to align the work of the EN with the work of ERA. So we just have 2 months, February, March, to handle the comments. Next click. So in parallel, we're looking in an ad hoc group with ERA, with all representative bodies. What clauses should we adjust in the TSI? Do we have to adjust references to the standard? And we want to get the feedback of that group by the 23rd of January when this PR and EN inquiry ends. Because afterwards it will be difficult to take into account feedback from ERA. We have in parallel also a cybersecurity group. This is with the system pillar of Europe's rail. Was first looking what do we have to adjust in the EN. There was a request to add a lot of requirements on shared communication services, but we agreed now that it's not the place to do this in a product standard of just the EMS, because it should be applicable to all devices on board. So if you take a next click, likely you will. So we have now the group dealing with what is the interface with the standard of Senelec. But recommendation 5 is including exchange possibly in the energy TSI, but exchange is now standardized in the IRS 9930. So we can continue the working group of that ad hoc working group and see, should we add something in TSI? This doesn't have to be done before end of January, so this can be continued in February, March. Do we need to add something on exchange function? Yes or no? Next click. From the cybersecurity, as said before, we won't add the shared communication service in the Senelec standard. We will just add what is needed in the EMS itself. And then it's possible the documents created by System Pillar might be introduced or partially in an ERA technical document on the cybersecurity regarding such shared communication services. They should afterwards be introduced in the IEC 61375 series, dealing with onboard networks and the communication from board to ground. But it might be best to have it first parked in this ERA technical document, then give a mandate to IEC, please do this. And when IEC is ready, parts of that technical document can be withdrawn and the link in TSI can go to the IEC standard instead of the ERA technical document. Next click. So then when we have conclusions on the exchange function, of course, the draft has to be finalized. So I just put there the technical working group TSIs. The work has to be finalized by the end of 26. And then the first possible time it can be approved by risk would be June 27. There is also a meeting in February, but it's unlikely that it's immediately put on the agenda and voted already in February. So I put here June. It could also be November, the 3rd meeting of 27. Next click. Of course, this is not fixed. This is a possible planning, and all actors have to agree on continuing on this track. So if we decide that energy TSI should include exchange function, then there could be references to the IRS 9930, but there's discussion, can a TSI refer to an IRS, which is not an international standard? It might be an international specification, which is permitted in the regulation. Or the third possibility is have an ERA technical document where you take some parts of the IRS in to be discussed. How detailed does it have to be? Does the full XSD has to be part of such a document, or can it be just higher level requirements and then also make an ERA of technical opinion saying to be compliant with the higher level requirements in a technical document, you can be compliant with this IRS 9930. In parallel, we already decided in the working group that we will revise. Now it's not with my Senelec head, but with the UIC head, that we're revising this IRS 9930 and going to create edition 2. But also this opens the possibility to discuss with ERA on how should we adjust the document and how to have an IRS in parallel with possibly an ERA technical document. Next click. That's likely the last one here, yes. So we are adjusting the EN, but the EN is linked with the actual legislative framework, so the actual TSIs, with the 2023 or whatever version of the TSI. So we will have to start already somewhere next year in the preparation of an amendment adapting the annexed sets, which is then for the harmonized standards, so to indicate which clauses of the new EN will be giving a presumption of conformity with clauses of the TSI. This will continue. If you look on the top of the screen, there was all the steps of approving a standard. This also will be for an amendment. So it will take up to 28 until these amendments are approved and published.
Thank you, Bart. So now we will move to Dire, the director, if Cyril, my colleague, can make sure that Dira is able to speak.
Yes, you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Thank you. I will turn your slides.
Thank you very much, Jacobo. My name is Dira Martin Gulbrandsen. I'm Director of ERES. ERES is an open non-profit cooperation between railway infrastructure managers. And our responsibility is at the national level for settlement of traction energy. Today we are 10 partner countries and we have been working together in this field for more than 20 years now. And in my short introduction, I would like to broaden the perspective a bit and explore the fundamental reasons behind our also commitment to standardizing traction energy settlement. So take the next slide, please. So back in the early 2000s, the 3 Scandinavian countries, also we joined forces to develop common solutions for measuring, settling, and invoicing of traction energy. And this marked the beginning of what became the ERES partnership. And again, then from day one, also we worked and thought beyond borders. Also we thought on international traffic. But then why did we start this journey 20 years ago? And here there are 2 main drivers. First of all, it's our customers, also the railway undertakings. They demanded from us settlement and billing based on metered energy. And because Giacomo mentioned this earlier, the principle is very simple. So you should pay for what you actually use and not based on estimates. And if you are able to be invoiced based on actual use, this creates a strong incentive to improve your energy efficiency and reduce consumption, and hopefully also your energy costs. And ultimately also make the rail transport more competitive. And the illustration slide, it highlights the potential for energy management and efficiency. As you see that energy consumption, it varies a lot between train journeys. But then for us as an infrastructure managers, then the motivation was also to provide transparent and non-discriminatory services to our railway undertakings. And to achieve this, also we had to develop the solutions capable of accommodating a wide range of technologies, including that you have these new modern standard energy meters, but you also have the old legacy meters that needs to be handled, and we have traction units without metering equipment. And all these needs to work together in a structured, transparent, and fair manner. And of course, then the adaptation of standardization is really fundamental because it guarantees fairness, consistency, and clarity for all railway undertakings. If you take the next slide, please. And also, I think also one of the strengths of the ERES partners and the 10 countries. We consider the entire value chain. That doesn't mean that we work in the entire value chain, but we consider it all the way from the meter on board traction unit and to the energy market. And also including how to apply new technology, regulation, and to basically also try to avoid creating barriers for the railway undertakings. Of course, introducing these new modern energy meters, it requires a fundamental change in how all involved organizations, the manner their processes and their business, all the way from the vehicle keepers, the railway undertakings, infra manager, entity charge or maintenance. My experience is that those that succeed are the ones that takes this challenge seriously. Also, you need to adapt your business. Okay, then of course, traction energy, also mentioned earlier, it's a small niche business. Number of traction units, it's limited in Europe, and the costs in railway, it can be high. So then standardization across Europe, okay, at least it enables the industry to benefit from economics of scale and that we can work together. And in the railway sector, I think we have already made quite some good progress. Also, we can use the same energy meter, and we have the same framework like this in the IRS 9930 that can be applied across Europe and hopefully then keep costs down. However, when we also work with the end consumer role within the energy market, there is still encounter quite diverse and non-standardized solutions. So these are basically national markets and a lot of national issues related to them, just about how the production of energy is done, the cost of balancing power, etc. Okay, my final point is that within areas also we have built a kind of a European community, also where experience and competence are shared, also openly, also both within the partnership but also outside to third parties. We always welcome everyone to take part. We have our ARES forum being arranged together with the DB Energy next year, 3rd June in Frankfurt. So please, if you want to hear more on settlement and metering and building energy, feel free to register there. And then again, coming back to our ultimate purpose, coming as an infrastructure manager, is basically to serve the railway undertakings. So if they succeed, so then basically we have done our job. I think that was my final note there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dire. And now let me also say that ARES is one of the solutions existing in Europe. There is other IMs that have their own corporate arrangement for settlement. However, ARES is the only example of a shared organization where multiple IMs have been pooling in order to serve taking as Dire has said. So thank you. Now we go back here in Brussels, and my colleague Esteban, we will now take the recommendations of the study one by one, and we will therefore address them not in necessarily chronological order of the numbering, but by topic, because we will now also based on what Art was explaining, we start with the recommendations more related to what we heard earlier.
So just hello again, colleagues. Yes, here we are going to tackle with specific recommendations in this point that could have an impact in the TSIs, TSI Energy and TSI Lock and Pass, as already announced and explained by my colleague Giacomo very well. These are very especially important for us because could have a follow-up in a revision of the TSI, let's say, could have, it's a recommendation. So the first one, and for orientation is to be a bit provocative for the discussion in the panel we will have. So the first one is, as explained, the analyze the possibility to incorporate the NOVO in the evaluation of the EMS requirements at the level of the infrastructure in TSI Energy. Is by the ones involved in evaluation, they know the table B1 in the TSI Energy. These are the way that the NOVO evaluates the different requirements of the TSI Energy, but the special chapter for the requirements of EMS and DCS are not part of this table. So nowadays, and this is very important, when authorizing an energy subsystem, the game is between the applicant, normally the infrastructure manager, and the National Safety Authority. There is no intervention of the NOVO, and at this point, we think that the link is missing in order to facilitate the process. As said, the key benefits is the simplification of the APIS process, the authorization process. Not only the simplification, but also to help all the actors involved, the applicant and the infra managers and the National Safety Authorities, to understand that the TSI requirements need to be met. So more specifically, the NOVO would require to be assessed to assess the DCS during the design, installation, and also the integration at the NS subsystem. But in this point, the Novo could also help the NSA to understand these requirements and could also spot what we have detected in the study, that it seems that not the level of understanding of these requirements is not the same in all the member states. And also, again, not only the level of understanding, but also the application of national provisions is something we have that is linked also, because it's really, we don't know if this is the cause and the consequence or vice versa, but the thing is that whenever we have that there is a lack of understanding of the European requirements in the TSIs, then national requirements or national provisions are applied. And it's also an important matter, an important question for ERA and for the Commission. These are the recommendations as explained, and here we received some comments during the consultation. I put the first one is against some colleagues in the sector, they think that the certification of this equipment by the Novo at the infrastructure level doesn't bring any added value. Is one of the points of view. Another point of view is that, of course, we see that the action of the Novo could help also in order to fulfill the European requirements, the TSI requirements, and to avoid also, or at least to clarify and to spot and to understand which national requirements apply in every member state. Also, we receive, it's not here, but also suppliers of equipment could be also interested at the level of certification because it brings also an added value for them. But okay, this is an open discussion.
In fact, thank you, Esteban. We now open the floor for questions around this recommendation, and then we will move on one by one.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
For recommendation number 4, please raise your hand online or here in the room in case you want to take the floor.
Mm-hmm. I think, Marco, you made a comment on the third part.
Yes, this is not related to this recommendation, so we will address it later. So then, in case of no questions, I would move on to the next recommendation. That's recommendation number 7.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Giacomo. Then again, this is related to the TSI Low Campus. In TSI Low Campus, as explained, the action of the Novo is already there. They are part. They need to certify the integration of these equipments in the rolling stock on board. But we plan to go further, to go deeper, and to also offer the possibility to have an IC certification to certify or to evaluate the EMS at the interoperability constituent. This, we believe, we see that will facilitate the vehicle authorization and will facilitate the certification and minimize the national requirements. Again, in line also with what I've said before, you have seen that these 3 points are really an important matter for the agency. First, facilitate the certification. Certification is an important cost for the applicants, and we have seen with other ICs already recognized in the TSI Low Campus that whenever you have a certificate IC, then to obtain the certification at the subsystem level is easier and cheaper. And this facilitates also the part of the authorization, given in this case is for vehicles mainly by the agency, but also for the NSA. So it's also facilitate our life. If I can speak for the point of view of the agency, and also again to spot national requirements on that. These are really another matter of worrying for the agency. We are also trying to engage with NSAs and to try to clarify, not to clean, but at least to make it transparent and clear for all applicants, all national requirements, national laws that apply to rail components. And of course, and at the end, as also announced and explained by Giacomo, at the end, The objective of that is to facilitate interoperability and cross-acceptance of these equipments in all the EU market. Benefits, you can see there, is already explained, less complex and faster vehicle authorization, certainty and facilities for de novo assessment, and also reducing interoperability barriers, and of course, increased competition. This is one of the points, one of the comments we received, and I'm going to be provocative with the comments against and in favor. One of the comments we received in favor of this recommendation is that suppliers, they could be happy because once the equipment is certified as an AC, it could be easier for them to go to other markets, other member states, in order the requirements to be cross-accepted in this way. Then another point of view, from the technical point of view, the first comment you see in the slide, to have reliable energy values at the level of, it's not only important the integration, but also the accuracy and reliability of the equipment itself at isolated. So at the level, the IC certification could bring some added value. Again, another argument against that, to be fair play, is that for other colleagues in the sector, the point here is not about the equipment itself, but about the integration at the level of the rolling stock subsystem. So for that, more than digging further in the IC certification, could be going deeper at the certification evaluation of the subsystem level. Of course, comments in both sense. Open fire for discussion and for your comments.
Thank you. We have a first question from Unife.
So yeah, it's so personally, it's the first time that I see this point 7 in this presentation. So of course we will need to check it into the detail. But the feedback on the interoperability constituents that we have from our members is that that the exception made of CCS, interoperability constituents have not really proven to facilitate the certification and authorization process. And in the contrary, it needs a lot of documentation to be carried out. And we see that it actually complexifies the certification and authorization process. So at first sight, we would be cautious actually to have the EMS as an interoperability constituent, because the problem with the interoperability constituent is actually that when they exist, you have to mandatorily apply them. So you don't have the alternative, except in few cases that are accepted, like the toilets, for instance. You do not have the alternative to have the certification at the subsystem level. So yeah, we are not sure that that having the EMS as interoperability constituent would really facilitate the certification and authorization process, but we have to check the proposal into the details.
Thank you. I will repeat the question. So Unife did receive the draft study during our written consultation, and this recommendation was contained and explained there in detail. So it's a pity we didn't have the time to further consult members. You asked that, from your point of view, except for CCS, in your opinion, IC did not prove that they facilitate certification and authorization, but on the contrary, they are seen as more additional complexity.
This can answer shortly. So your opinion is very welcome, because at the end, okay, I don't know if you talk about this element. I talk on the experience of other ICs, other interoperability constituents, accordingly to our experience and other feedback we received for certification of other ICs. This IC certification really brings value for de novo, because it facilitates the certification at the subsystem level. And we have seen also in the authorizations applications in the agency that whenever the interoperability constituents are not having or holding this IC, then the work of de novo at the subsystem level is more difficult. That's the point at the level. Also, we have seen in the cases we have already received EMS on board as part of the authorization. That this evaluation it's really more difficult for de novo if there is no a previous evaluation, because at the end the IC certification, what the added value it brings is that whatever is depends on the accuracy and the functioning of the equipment is evaluated by the IC certification. It doesn't need to be evaluated at the subsystem level when it's already certified. So our experience is it seems that it shows the contrary. To talk about also the obligation to have IC certificates, we have also in the TSIs the possibility to give a kind of margin window time in order to allow not a mandatory certification of ICs, but to accept subsystems when the ICs are not certified, and to put a kind of deadline from the point it was already in the TSI energy and TSI inf for ICs at that point. Okay, it's an open discussion. Only to say, because it's whenever we make a recommendation for a modification in the TSI, okay, these are recommendations in the study. Of course, if this at the end brings a really more formal request to modify a TSI, of course, this should be more formalized in a change request in the internal process, you know, the process. And of course, this is also needs an impact assessment more properly done, because this is an study. Only to say that.
Yeah, indeed. The recommendation, it says the wording is to analyze the opportunity to amend it. So it's a food for thoughts, so to say. I think Bart, you had a question?
I don't have specific position pro or contra interoperability constituent, but we've seen that the actual process of approving EMS is sometimes failing, that they put wrong cables in between different devices, or even put a transducer between a sensor and an EMS, because the sensor has a voltage output and the ECF, the meter, has a current input. They just put something in between. Of course, this affects the accuracy. So there are problems in the actual process of approving EMSs. And in any case, it's not that an EMS, if an EMS is an interoperable constituent and it is approved, it can only be approved for a certain type of traction unit. If you install it in another one, you have to see if you don't have to put another EMS, because the rated current of the sensors have to be adjusted to the rated current of the traction unit. So you will still have to do device level approval, then putting together the devices. Are they able to work together, and what are the constraints? What type of cable? What's the maximum length of a cable? How can it be in the environment, EMC environment of a locomotive? Where do you have to look at? All this has to be investigated, and then also the installation on board, and also that has to have a design review, type test, and routine tests, seeing that it's functioning. And I don't see a difference if it's interoperable constituent or not. You have to do all these steps. Otherwise, you will have failing EMSs not able to send data to ground to the DCS.
Thank you. Other questions from the room or from online? Okay, seeing none, we can move to the next recommendation. So we pack this together, the recommendation number 10 and number 11.
Yes.
And then after this, I will be happy also to get if any questions that relate to the presentation that Bart gave about the standard, or the presentation of Lire about RS. Please, Esteban.
Yes, so we have packed these last two. Please, if I can't, I would pay special attention to the number 10, analyze the status of DMS and DSS accordingly to cybersecurity requirements. I think this was already explained by Bart in his slides, and also by Giacomo. We have detected in the consultation and in the research in the study that the cybersecurity requirements could be an issue when approving and to certifying the equipment. And nowadays we have no requirements such as neither in TSI Energy nor in TSI Low and Pass. This was a concern from the sector. We reflected that in the recommendation, because in parallel, of course, we have the mandate from the Commission to implement the cybersecurity requirements in the TSIs. We have started with TSI Energy and the related energy interface in TSI look and pass, mainly with the standard and EMS. And we are developing this in mainly two work groups, explained by Bart, and already you can see in the slides. The ad hoc group on EMS standard is a specific working group, let's say more a task force, a specific working group with ERA, reviewing the clauses of the TSI, the TSIs, any lock and pass, in order to streamline and to optimize the references to the 5463, but also we are dealing with cybersecurity activities. We are in contact also in parallel with the Sensenelec working group, also with the group of cybersecurity experts of the Commission that coming from the Europe's Rail Railway Undertaking, Europe's Rail European Joint Undertaking, sorry, and that we have these two parallel streams working on the cybersecurity requirements, and of course we are taking on board the comments received during the study in the discussions in these two groups. Special attention and in these two parallel streams is the ad hoc group. In the ad hoc group, we also tackle other discussions with other energy regulations, the MIT regulation. For that, see the recommendation 8 of the study. But I think this Giacomo has a specific slide on that, so I would refer in that point to these other EU energy regulations for the discussion during the slide from Giacomo, and we will be happy to answer to you. So you see that in the slides, the benefits of this point 10, legal certainty and clear compliance with these cybersecurity requirements. And last, the point 11, I put it is always by default managed by the agency. We are also always involved in the Europe's Rail undertaking for all the research activities regarding to the railway matters. And as part of that, of course, we are sensitive to the needs of the sector. We have seen that this is a specific regarding the compatibility or avoiding interferences with other equipments. Normally, the EMS on board requires an exclusive installation with cables and antennas. They cannot share other antennas and cables, for instance, for the ERTMS or the FR MCS communication system in order to avoid interferences. But we have seen that this duplication of system could be avoided if more research is provided in order also to guarantee safety levels, because the objective to have this dedicated installation only for EMS and not to sharing with other equipments is to guarantee safety. But if safety can be guaranteed with more research without having duplication of hardware, let's say, it could be a simplification of the installation and also the certification. At the end, lower costs for the sector. So we are sensitive to that, and we have reflected on that in the recommendation number 11. So open fire again.
Thank you, Esteban. So the floor is open for questions, room and online, about 10 and 11. Bart.
On the recommendation 10, special attention, we will ask to check that security patches are allowed without re-homologation, and if something is needed on the legal framework and also on the EN regarding such patches, because that's obviously impossible that a security patch needs re-homologation, then that would be terrible.
Yes, I think you already talked in your slide. Yes, in the ad hoc group and with the Europe's Rail cybersecurity experts, we have a discussion how to tackle with these requirements, cybersecurity requirements, whether in the TSI or particularly in the standard 5463. It's a kind of fundamental question, a strategical question, also for other development, because this will be the example also for other or the application to cybersecurity requirements to other standards. So this is a pilot project. We are discussing whether these patches should be included in TSI or in a technical document of the TSI Energy. That is not the TSI Energy, but it's a kind of annex of the TSI Energy, or could be somehow referring the EM 5463. So the discussions are ongoing. You can see in this debate.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, so then I will now open the floor in case participants have questions for Bart regarding the content of the update of the standard, so what he presented earlier, or for Dire about RF.
I have a comment from Genovese. As a minimum benefit, having the EMS as an IC would allow to have production requirements verified by the Novo. And moreover, it would make more easy the harmonization with the directive, the MID directive. It's a comment. Also, it's linked to the other discussion, but the other discussion,
we will reach to this.
So
Okay.
thank you, Genovese.
There's no comments for Bart or for Dire, then I will move on to the next set of recommendations. So this is, yes, it is some reference to the fact that, as I said earlier, there is not everywhere a free choice of supplier. There are some national arrangements impeding this. And as I said earlier, ERS is one group solution which is shared, but also other national solutions can be equally good if they are, of course, compliant and compatible for data exchange. So going to recommendation number 1, so to consider to enforce TSI and existing requirements, some conditions to feed the debate. So DCS exists in many member states since years. There are different solutions for DCS and exchange function available on the market that IAMS member states can opt for. As you said, the invoicing based on estimations, because there is no DCS, is detrimental for competitiveness and for interoperability. And despite some diverging views, we conclude that the implementation cost of setting up a DCS are not enormous. So there is a bit of perception that is the cost is a very big barrier, as also highlighted in the survey, but we find no robust evidence. So the floor is open for recommendation number 1. Okay, so yes, and, we are not the enforcer at the end. So. Yes, please.
A very simple question. Do the European Commission intends to enforce this TSI, which is really key for us, for all the players who are running trains, cross-border trains, so who are also major investors in cross-border markets. So for us, it's really key. So do you intend to enforce this?
I will repeat the question from the Lessors Association. So Carol is asking to the Commission if there is any intention to enforce, actually, to go into enforcement action.
Okay, I'll raise my hand. Good afternoon now. Veronika Sárik from the European Commission, the Directorate General for MOVE, so the Mobility and Transport Directorate, and I am from the Unit C4, which is responsible. I can turn on my own camera now.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. And I am from the unit that is responsible for rail safety and interoperability. So it is indeed within our scope to take care of the TSIs, to regulate on the TSIs, as well as follow up the enforcement of the TSIs. That being said, indeed, it is one of our tasks, and I will have some concluding remarks. So I will address it a little bit here, but just to clarify, we are for the time being recipient of this report that is still in a draft phase. So first we would like to have a final report, have the overall view of the picture, and then define next steps. I would like to reconfirm that monitoring of implementation of EU law and enforcement is part of the tasks of the European Commission. So when we see that there is a larger issue at stake, then we have certain tools to enforce, indeed. Now it has been brought to our attention that there are some strategic issues around this topic, so we will take next steps accordingly. this is as much of a commitment as I can make today, Carol. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Veronica. There is a question online. From OBB.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Hi,
Yes,
Giacomo.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, hi. My name is Martin Svetkov. I'm working for ÖBB, but also here I'm representing the European infrastructure managers and also on behalf of SER. Unfortunately, I had exactly the same question, and it was already answered by Veronica. So we're wondering how this can be enforced, that everybody has a DCS in place and that every country can exchange energy data by themselves. But I raised the hand at the same time like the previous participants, so I think so far the question has been answered.
Anyways, and a second call for action. Other questions?
Loud and clear.
Okay,
No, that's fine.
seeing none, and I think we can move on to the next recommendation. So recommendation number 2 related to telematics. As we said, there would be an advantage coming from the TSI telematics, which will replace soon, once published in the official journal of the European Union, which will happen in the coming weeks, the TAF and TAP TSI, following a positive vote on the new telematics TSI by the risk committee in November. As I said, the intention is to use train composition messages for exchange and settlement, and the use of telematics can streamline reporting requirements on actual users of vehicles, also helping those exchange and settlement system functions that today have been struggling in accessing data from rail IMs to use actually telematics data. The floor is open. Marin, is it on this point?
Yes, we just have a comment as infrastructure managers that, we maybe misunderstood or maybe it's not clear enough. We have the opinion that the DCS, the train composition messages should not go to the DCS. They actually they should be they should be transmitted to the settlement system. And this, we would like to underline that infrastructure managers cannot exchange between themselves the train composition messages, if just to clarify on this. And we are wondering what will be the next steps following the approval of the telematic TSI.
Thank you for that. Indeed, it's now corrected, as you see on the screen, is to the exchange settlement systems, not to the DCS, which was a typo in the draft report. I have a question here in the room from ProRail.
Yes, well, one more complexity to this item is railway units, train compositions which are leased and used by multiple railway undertakings, and that can change by day. Which is very difficult. So who will be responsible for the actual running? That's clear, but how will the invoicing be and how can it be settled? And the next item is the selling of rolling stock. If a concession changes, what we see in the Netherlands, that we have certain lines, it will be in a concession system and the railway undertaking changes, but the vehicle will be renumbered because the railway undertaking changes, and that means also a lot of changes in settlement data, which is a lot of administrative work. We haven't found a solution yet.
Thank you for this question. I will maybe first answer repeat the question also. So you said that what about leased vehicles? You see this as a difficulty to track the actual user, given that sometimes subcontracting or leasing can happen also on a daily basis. And in the case of sale of rolling stock, the owner or keeper would change. I can say that telematics messages that the use case for energy would be based on train-ready message. And this means the message that rail undertakings generate upon departure. So regardless of what subcontracting has happened, the IM for safety and operations and traffic management system knows which rail undertaking is operating a given train, even within daily change of subcontractor. And so the actual user is identified in the telematics message. Regarding the change of ownership of vehicles, this is normal practice. Vehicles are sold, the change owner or keeper, and then the vehicle number is updated either by changing the owner or the keeper or by re-registering the vehicle. So I don't really see a very big problem there. But
yes, to complete on it. So the train run data is already used in multiple countries. So we're doing it in Belgium since 2011, based on the train consistent messages we were receiving from legacy systems. Very few were using or still using up to now already the tap messages, but it's the same information. So we know the EVNs, and the EVNs make the link of a train run to which RU was operating the train run, and the EVN is then the link with the consumption point ID in the EMS. And this is standard already also applied in ProRail, or for ProRail in the Netherlands. So this is just officializing what is done already in multiple countries and also forcing the same protocol everywhere. So it's facilitating that you can use the same protocol in multiple countries. On change of EVN, yes, we know it's a topic we have to address. We have the master data in the IRIS 9930, where it's already foreseen that you can do such changes. A problem is if you do a different date, a change of the EVN on the side of the traction unit and inside the CPID, inside the EMS. That's our difficulty. So we hope this is done coordinated and that you adjust if you're selling a series of rolling stock, that while repainting the outside and also adjusting it in the systems, that on the same time you adjust the CPID and you do a recommissioning of that EMS with a new CPID into the markets.
The challenge to this, thank you for your answers. The challenge of this procedure is that someone has to visit the rolling stock, yes, which will be expensive and time consuming.
It can be online possibly.
It can be online
with a change,
but changing software or parameters on board of rolling stock is most of the times also an item of vehicle registration and NOBO looking at. So there is always time in between. And you have to resubmit the change for validation. And if you're lucky, it's just, okay, go ahead. But if you're not lucky, a lot of questions will be asked. So there is a time-consuming item between there, changing software parameters of equipment on board of rolling stock. In the process of how it is currently done, it's not foreseen for this kind of item. So for the railway undertakings, it's very expensive. And in the meantime, what do? Either the units will not be able to do the service, or we all have a problem in addressing where does the bill go to for the energy.
Correct. Thank you for that. It's an important point that we can further underline in the study, and also in terms of future use case of air ontology, whereby if future legislation allows, the vehicle register can be queried. This can simplify and streamline the process that you two just described. Okay, any other questions on these recommendations? I don't think so, so we can move on. So two coupled together, recommendation 3, improving dissemination and knowledge sharing. This is self-evident unless somebody wants to add something, or maybe volunteer to further disseminate as UAC and RS already do. Recommendation number 5 is, as we said, the opportunity to extend the scope of application of TSIN to data exchange function and settlement processes. This would improve interoperability, minimize national requirements, and give more legal certainty. So some considerations to feed the debate. We understood that the main interoperability hurdles, beside those that don't have a TCS, there are a minority of countries, is actually the exchange and settlement. And this is the main problem that is affecting energy metering. And the mere existence of a DCS is not enough, even if compliant. So the sector-led efforts with the IRS 90930 are a voluntary scheme, very, of course, welcome and established since many years. But as we see on the map, not all IMs are part of this group. There are missing some, and it's a voluntary scheme, so legal enforceability is not possible from the side of the authorities. And I believe, it's only understood in interviews, anyway, there is a requirement of contracts between parties, also agreeing on data model, data processing, etc., in a bilateral way, and maybe in a different way between a country and another, and IM and another specific use. So this is, in a nutshell, a bit the idea. Bart gave already a plan of how to make this happening, a possible plan, a possible idea, but please raise your hand in case of question.
Is it possible to do it in the ad hoc group to continue?
No doubt, absolutely. I mean, yes, in that point, okay, we can, in the previous slides, I explained what was the purpose. It was the main objective of the ad hoc group was to streamline the TS energy. Yes. Regarding analyzing the clauses of the EN, the 5463, we incorporated on board cybersecurity requirements. Also, we are discussing this important question of the other EU energy legislation, and also this we could tackle on that how to put it, because we are already discussing about the technical document for the cybersecurity requirements for this extending the scope of the TSI energy, of course, because not all the standards are really standards in the way that we can refer directly in a TSI energy, but we can try to cope with that. We don't have a lot of time ability, but we could dedicate some time.
The group is a small group with a small mandate and short timed. This expansion would be much higher complexity, so it needs to be further analyzed, this opportunity, also based on the mandate from the Commission that should be probably revised, and then probably set up in terms of additional activity in the working group, which then, is the whole process of writing actually a new PSI.
No, this is fully right. I mean, in terms of justification, could be a new TSI requirement, so it's really legitimate to discuss it in the ad hoc group. But resources,
yes.
But
okay. In case there are no more questions on this, I will move on. Sorry.
Sorry, but regarding item 5, you would like to make a remark that harmonization on EU and TSI level will reveal 28 national implementations with possibility of 28 different national implementations, adding a lot more complexity in the one European railway market. So from that consideration, from that point of view, it would be very nice to consider it thoroughly to make it happen.
Okay, thank you from ProRail, supporting recommendation 5, if I can summarize it like this. Yes. Please, Carol, yes? And also the lessons would be happy to support recommendation 5. I move on to recommendation number 6. So exploring the cost and benefits of one DCS settlement and DCS and settlement system at EU level to reduce complexity, duplication costs, or at least as a minimum allow the pooling of these businesses across different member states. The TSI text itself does not have this aim in mind, and that's a pity. I don't think it's the intention to any of the legislator to force that member states cannot pool this activity. On the contrary, it is definitely interesting. And as I said earlier, DCS is an IT equipment, so the pooling can reduce costs, but also, as we said, this is a very big niche. It could concentrate very scarce IT expertise in energy metering in one or few organizations, given that it's a very big niche. So open floor for this.
Of course, a joint system should be possible. It's already existing. Nobody is complaining on it. So ERAS is having a joint system for 10 countries, but it's not, if you read the text, it's not contradicting with the actual text. It's just a way of interpreting. Each country offers it, but some are offering a joint system. Making that explicitly is, of course, a good way forward, avoiding possible problems otherwise.
Thank you, Bart. Other questions on this one?
Yes, Marin.
Yes, Marin, please.
Yeah, I would like also to confirm what just Bart said. It was misleading, so the headline with the text. So we believe that would cause a lot of problems. It's and a lot of things to consider and to get everybody on board. If we are really thinking about having just one DCS, then we believe that having always two options is better, and a free market is always the better option. And furthermore, behind the technical, besides the technical specifications, we also need to think about the costs. Also, some companies which introduced recently DCS, these costs are allocated now for the next decades. So starting a new IT project will bring new burdens, and the next thing is also with the data governance. There are contracts between the rail undertakings and infrastructure managers now putting all the data in one pot. Should be also analyzed if this could be done in such a easy way. But we are relieved that you are not enforcing this, and we can continue as it is. Of course, synergies, as Bart mentioned, are good. The best idea would be if there will be more, and maybe a more joint solutions which everybody can benefit from.
Okay, thank you very much. Francesco Sperotto online.
Yes, Francesco Sperotto from Hasler Rail. Instead of to propose a single DCS for Europe, maybe it could be useful to have a reference DCS. This is because even if we are trying to do our best to define requirements in EN 5463 in PSI, standardization itself is not enough to reach real interoperability. Because there is always room for interpretation. And so an effort can be done at the European level to define, to set up, and to maintain also in times reference DCS, so that when you have to verify, validate, certify also an EMS, you have a reference DCS. So if the EMS is able to connect, to send data, and to connect, okay, with this reference DCS, then you have a proof that that EMS is really interoperable. And on the other side, if you have a reference DCS, you can see what we intended when we defined the requirement in the norm and in the standard. For instance, a DCS now for the EN 5463 2017 shall implement all the protocols and all the services, but in reality, across Europe, only few DCS did so. So this is an interoperability problem, because if you develop an EMS that is used only, for instance, FTP mailbox, then you find in Europe that there are some DCS that are only implementing HTTP, and the two doesn't match. So having a reference DCS that solve all of the interpretation issue can be beneficial also for future for the variation that you are introducing in the next standard.
Thank you for this. Unless there is no other question, I would just underline that this recommendation is again it's a food for thought for further analysis and exploration. And thank you very much for especially this last intervention, which can somehow translate to have one DCS to be a test bed for all EMS in order to ensure interoperability across Europe. In any case, there is no, from ERA point of view, promotion of any of the solutions. ERES is one of the options. Other IMs chose different arrangements or even fully outsourced to a third party, as it is in the case in France, Germany, and Poland. This recommendation is not around ERES, as ERES is, let's say, the only example of pooling. That's why we brought it up here also today. I'm aware of the time, so I will move on. Recommendation number 8 is to analyze and potentially clarify the applicability of the MID directive, measurement instruments, to EMS. Some considerations again to feed the debate. EMS are not the same exactly as a smart energy meter installed in buildings because they are moving consumption points across different grids. They are already regulated by the TSI Lock and Pass and to a big extent by the EN 50463 standard. And the EMS itself is certified and authorized when installed on rolling stock, either at production or at retrofit stage. So the floor is open. Please.
Just for clarification, the idea where EMS applied for directive measurement instruments, because it's covered in the test emission pass, right? So it's been covered by the directive.
This is a legal question, and we are putting this recommendation to further analyze because during the investigation and the interest in the study, there is some uncertainty about the applicability of the MID to EMS at all. And this is why we have this recommendation as a justification or as an additional safeguard. In the slide is that, as I said, the EMS are not whatever device, they are anyway already regulated and authorized. ProRail.
We would like to point out, as we have mentioned earlier, that this is a discussion in two parts separately. One is a technical item and another one is a legal item. For all technical items, we see very good solutions within the framework. But the legal item is just the MID framework will also add into item number 7, the certification and NOVO work. The main issue that we see here is that from the energy market, the energy suppliers, which in a completely different legislation, and energy manufacturers, which is in the same legal thing. An energy supplier will have a commercial contract with a railway undertaking. And if a railway undertaking says, I need 1,000, a volume of 1,000, the energy supplier will buy that from the energy producers and give a forecast and have a contract with the railway undertaking for the price of that volume. Now, if the metering says it's 500, then the railway of the energy supplier has a shortage of 500, which he has to pay to the manufacturers of the energy. And if the metering says 1,500, then they have to buy a little bit more. And the price difference is the risk of the energy supplier. Within the legal framework of the MID, this is all regulated because the whole certification and the whole process of the metering device is standardized and legally bound. And that will give a large benefit for the European Union if it's on EU level and not 28 different implementations within our member states. The technical item can be really easily solved either by the standard, either by a summation of the technical requirements on the system and ask the OEML evaluation to make a recommendation to attack to the MID. So that's our argument that we will give to make it more easy for an open railway market, and so a little bit afraid that no energy supplier will step into because the financial risks are for the energy suppliers.
Thank you. Unless it's needed, I will not repeat the question if somebody says so we can move on. We have a little time.
We made an analysis, or I made an analysis already in checking the requirements of the 5463 with MID Annex 5 and 1. It's mostly in line. There are very small things like an EMS shall start measuring from 0.4% of the rated current, where in MID it's at 0.2. But there's nothing to do with the overall accuracy. It is just a very minor thing. If you want to have a Class C MID meter, then there are some influence factors where we permit higher additional error than in MID for a Class C meter. But in major lines, an EM5463 compliant meter, and there's a lock and pass TSI compliant meter, can be regarded as MID compliant. But of course, the inverse is not true. Any MID compliant meter, which is just an active energy meter, can of course not be installed on board of rolling stock. There are much more requirements on installation on devices on board of rolling stock. So the inverse can't be set. It's not that you're a MID compliant meter that you can install it on board of trains. That's excluded.
So yes, we do subscribe to that point of view. But having a metering device which has the same specifications or even better than an MID device does not legally make it an MID device. And for energy supplies on the energy market, that security that the metering is correctly done is very, very important. And even in the Netherlands, we have special companies which are certified in accordance with the MID to do the maintenance, calibration, installation, removal, update of the metering devices. And that is a service which is standard according to the EU legislation, that such services must be available for all companies who want to do that. So having that said, we are looking not only to the national laws of the Netherlands, but we want to encourage the system to create at EU level legislation which is suitable for all 28 member states without having 28 different implementations of it.
Yes.
I'm aware of the time, so we last have question on this one, then we move on.
Thank you, Laurent from UIC. Just as you know, a lot of work was done for the IRS 930 with a lot of infrastructure manager and undertaking. And so I just want to say that I fully agree with Bart and his request to look how this IRS could be referenced in the CSI. And just to keep it in mind, in the TSI, we have around 14 IRS and leaflets quoted in the TSI. I do not think it is a problem. So we'll be discussing to see how it is possible.
Thank you. We move on to the next recommendation. So number 9, consider a potential need to analyze the legal status of IAMs and energy supply with regards to traction current infrastructure and services in EU legislation. So it's somehow related to what we were discussing before. Some considerations again for food thoughts. The overhead contact line is clearly regulated. It's a direct cost charged by IAMs to our use. The ownership of the infrastructure beyond the overhead contract line, so transformers, substations, and transmission lines can be different across member states, might not be always everything the rail IAM owning. And there is a case in Germany where through court rulings and national law, this boundary has been somehow clarified for making clear that in the case of Germany, as I said, there is a split company, DB Energie, that is under the umbrella of the energy market legislation and the energy regulator, while DB Infrago, the rail infrastructure manager, is under the railway market legislation and the railway regulator. The floor is open. Frank.
Yeah, Frank from the regulator, the German one. So yeah, we have to stick to the situation. So we have a cut separation between the responsibilities. So yeah, therefore we have those rulings from the energy-related regulatory part, which are responsible for the German traction current network. And of course, this leads to conflicts because the energy ruling chamber is not an expert in the rail issues, and yeah, and we in the rail ruling chamber, we have no say in those energy topics. So it is a problem that we see and that we have to live with, because we, yeah, at the moment we cannot act against the law that is there. So yeah.
So
actually, I have no idea how to change this.
But thank you for your intervention. Frank is from the Bundesnetzagentur, which is the market regulator in Germany. It's actually the same organization for energy and rail, but two different departments. But in our analysis, what we just came up with is that there is some literature from the network regulators of railways and academia about this problem, and to our understanding, Germany is the only one that ruled on it. So other countries did not make this split. Bart?
It's also an example of every country is doing it differently, and there is missing maybe on how should an infrastructure manager be seen, or a settlement responsible, make it more general, a settlement responsible, be seen in the energy market. Should there be a standard role? Should it be a dedicated role as such a railway infrastructure manager in the energy market? In Belgium, we have a special role, specific role in how the energy regulation is transposed, and we follow the closed distribution system rules when it's not regulated in the railway market. But it's a very strange thing, and it's country by country dependent. Another thing related to it is then on the infrastructure manager as settlement responsible has costs in the energy markets. How should he re-invoice these costs? We're doing it as a mandatory part of an additional service, which is also very strange inside the railway market. So we use the railway market
network statements. And there is an additional service for delivering commodity, where they can choose a supplier or can choose either give a mandate to us to do it for them. But there we add, but when you use it, whatever, if you use your own supplier or not, you shall pay the grid fees. In some countries, if you do it, if it's a TSO role, like in France and in Poland, likely this is done by the supplier, because if you're a public system operator, it's typically done by the supplier. But if you're a closed distribution system operator, this is not done by the supplier. So we have to do it as system operator. So there is a lot of inconsistencies between different countries, and I understand that it's difficult for the IUs to understand why it's everywhere different.
Yes, and if I may add to it, that in the Netherlands we have also the same kind of system, but we also do have the responsibility of the grid owner to do the metering if it's thing, and the railway is in between now, and we got 28 different rulings. There might be a possible solution in here by TSI Energy assigning the ERS a settlement agreement for the whole European Union. In that case, the conjunction of the infrastructure manager as settlement agreement has a legal status. Possibly provided, but I'm a technician and I'm not a juridical guy, but there might be a solution.
Thank you for that. I'm afraid we have to hurry up. We are a bit late. So we now claim to the end of our workshop. So thank you very much for your insightful interventions. I will give now the floor to Veronika Sarik from the Commission for some closing remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, Giacomo, and thank you for everyone for the active participation. As I have mentioned, but just to reiterate, indeed, we asked for this study, and now we are recipients of this study, and to the extent possible, I try to follow the development along the way, but it is being finalized. So when the study officially reaches us with the recommendations, then we are going to assess the contents and then determine specific follow-up measures. So I cannot today commit or conclude or confirm what is actually going to be the next steps from Commission perspective. But instead, I would like to a little bit take a wider perspective to reiterate why we asked for this study and also share some overarching thoughts for both of the studies. The executive director of the agency, Joanna, has already mentioned a little bit this concept of a better regulation. This is, for those of you who are not that familiar, one of those, the better regulation agenda or priorities are principles that we try to implement or we shall implement on a European level when we legislate. Now, you know that the TSIs are actually not the ordinary legislative procedure. They are implementing acts, so bit different process applies. But in this case, we really try to implement these principles when asking for these studies, namely to define EU actions based on evidence, so evidence-based regulation, to actually involve stakeholders, widely consult them along the way to define the measures, as well as if there is regulatory measure during those. And of course, the very much reiterated and welcome message of making simpler EU legal framework, making it better, making it simpler. So in this context, I hope you understood that these studies were really complex. I mean, you are the experts, so of course you're aware that these are very complex technical issues. And in these, of course, as Commission, we rely on the agency and the expertise from the stakeholder groups, may that be on national or sectorial level, to collect these evidence so that we actually understand where the issues lie. Some of these studies actually initiate from stakeholders reaching out to us that certain things do not work, but we needed actually collect evidence. And again, many thanks to both agency colleagues who worked very hard on this and all of you who were involved along the way, because I believe we have a lot of data and content on our hand now to actually take next steps forward. Then the wide consultation, as I mentioned, you were all part of, and what we particularly appreciate already now is this holistic perspective. So indeed, the original studies were defined a little bit narrower, focusing on certain points we have identified. But along the way, based on the discussions with you and also based on the competence of agency colleagues, it really turned out to be rather an interface between infrastructure and rolling stock or other aspects of, in some cases, the subsystems than what we originally already foresaw. So I think it's a very important point to acknowledge that it's always more complicated than you assume from the beginning it to be. And this is where we are now. So a little bit for the overarching thoughts. So I hope you also agree that both the wide consultation of stakeholders as well as the evidence-based proposal for regulation or the prep work or preparatory work for legislative action is now really followed and been taken into account. And then we come for the easier or better regulation if there is a regulatory action. Now, for both studies, and I will touch on both of them, it revolves a little bit around the same concept, balancing between regulatory intervention and providing flexibility. And it's always this very difficult balance when we have to say it has to be easier to implement, it has to be better, it has to be simpler legal framework. So if I start with the electrification studies, first of all, I do believe that it's important to time revisit our assumptions. So indeed, 16 years ago, this was an analysis already done once, but now we have advanced a decade and a half in time. So I think it was important to take a look again. Where are we? Take stock and then assess. And many thanks for the colleagues doing so. I believe and I hope we all agree if we could restart or magically flip the railway system, now we would go for a single electrification system with a single mode locomotive all across Europe. No national rules, Euro pantograph everywhere, same pole spacement between the overhead contact line poles, and so on. So these national divergences would be non-existent. Now coming back to reality, this is not our reality, and I think we all have to acknowledge that this flip will not happen magically materialize out of thin air. So now, as with many other systems, we always have to discuss the transition between the mix of legacy systems to a European one, a target system, right? But we also at the same time have to acknowledge that infrastructure in these cases often export constraints on the rolling stock side. It's a fact. Decision made on the infrastructure side, on their level optimized for good reasons. There are decisions made to not change or to continue doing things in a certain way, will in some cases generate consequences in terms of costs and operations, also on operators. So we have to understand if there is a way out of this, if we can resolve some of these. And we also have to acknowledge the transition is disruptive. It's a fact. And given that now rolling stock side has adapted in a large extent, as we have seen, to infrastructure, is disruptive for both infrastructure and rolling stock side. Therefore, and I believe it was Unifa who lifted this, we also always have to look at what is a short-term gain and a short-term cost increase in order to achieve a long-term gain. And if these things balance each other out, if there is a cost benefit on the long term to do so. We do have interoperability issues. We do see technical differencing creating barriers. But the question is, these admittedly do not seem to be resolving themselves. So the question, where and at what moment and to what extent a regulatory action is necessary? It's always, we are coming back to the same discussion, which is indeed this balancing act, where we need to intervene and where we can actually leave it up to the sector to resolve either by innovation on the rolling stock side, either by other means. So this is what, for me, is the purpose of this study, and this is what it actually pointed at in many cases. Where does this transition actually make sense? What is feasible? Because we have to remain within the boundaries of reality. Where does it make sense to propose a complete overhaul? Does it make sense to propose a complete overhaul? Does it make sense to propose point interventions? What are the right tools to achieve some interventions? Or is transition the only tool? Is transition to a single system the only tool? We have heard the call for other innovative solutions such as battery trains to bridge these gaps. So it's a really careful balancing act all along the way, where to intervene, how to intervene, and what is the best solution to intervene. And as often when we open one door, we find 5 other doors behind that one door. And this is what happens, I believe, with this study. So now we also see that it's the original scope electrification is actually not the only issue related to the energy subsystem that causes interoperability hinders. So now we really have to reflect, and we really sincerely invite you to be part of this reflection, how to move forward based on the recommendations. I do genuinely believe it is a collective task. You are the most dedicated experts to these areas in Europe, so we really invite you to be part of the solution here, because it's really in our genuine collective interest to move away from these islands, these little barriers on a European level. Now, coming to the next study, or the second study, also a lot to learn on many different levels, I believe, from this one. I will start with a bit of a cynical thought, but we see that even putting things in legislation sometimes does not automatically and magically ensure that certain issues will be solved. Not to propose that we will not try to solve things via legislation, but just to acknowledge that indeed there are certain limitations to this. That again, I would like to underline that it is one of the tasks, or these are the tasks of the European Commission, to also monitor the implementation, follow up the implementation, and enforce the implementation of EU legal framework. This is being one of the issues that was brought to us by stakeholders, indicating that the legal framework as is not working as it was intended. I think, especially after the analysis, this is something we can confidently conclude. But indeed, for us to understand where the issues lie, we asked the agency to analyze reality, what is blocking, what is working. So once again, thanks for all colleagues, agency, and other colleagues contributing this, so that we have this analysis at the table now. And then I come back again to this balance between regulation, including enforcement, and the flexibility. Because we talk a lot about simplification and deregulation and cutting red tape and cutting costs, and we hear you, but in this respect specifically, I have to admit that I am put in a very difficult position when I hear that very clear call from various stakeholders and member states, and then I listen to the analysis and the conclusions of the agency for this specific situation that point in the complete opposite direction in a way. Because we heard that in order to ensure interoperability, we need more certification, and we need bigger scope of the authorization, and we need the regulation to be stricter, to include more specifications in order to achieve interoperability. So in this regard, of course, we have to acknowledge that providing flexibility comes with quite a lot of trust from a regulatory perspective, that the flexibility will not, in the end up with interoperability hinders, specifically for the railway system now. And when we see this specific use case, we have an existing legal framework, particularly I'm talking about now mostly for infrastructure, which is admittedly limited in terms of legal obligations, in terms of specification, and we do have generally a shrinking area for national rules. So from a regulatory perspective, I believe the effort was there to allow for certain flexibility and not have on a member state level 27 or how many national frameworks for this specific area. And particularly, there's also a sector declaration at the table, which were accepted as a means of self-commitment instead of a regulatory action. And I'd argue that this as a package, if you look at it, would answer the call of more regulatory flexibility and trusting all the actors to implement, and also implement in an interoperable manner. But now we see from the analysis that this might not have worked out optimally, at least for this case. I do not want to generalize, but both in implementation as well as when it's implemented, so systems in place, in terms of functionality and interoperability, we see issues. So I don't want to be too dire, but I would like to really make you aware a little bit that of course, certain parts of the follow-up is on Commission. And I take that as a very clear message. But it is also a collective goal to find a way forward. So while we have a toolbox on a commercial level, we can improve the clarities, we can increase the specification to safeguard the interoperability, put more effort on monitoring and enforcing. These are the regulatory tools that we very often now hear a call not to implement. So we can't really have it both ways. So in this way, I really ask you to reflect on your responsibilities as well, in order to make the system work. And once again, I really invite you to be part of the solutions here, because of course the regulatory tools are limited, they are what they are. Someone asked in the chat, how can this be enforced? Of course, the ultimate enforcement tool is going for big bureaucratic procedures like infringements from the Commission toward the member state. But ideally, we would find more collaborative, more comprehensive ways, sectorial, member state and European level to address the issues that we targeted. So at our end, we will, of course, reflect on the next steps based on the very thorough work of the agency, which you all provided some inputs and were part of. Many thanks again. And then once again, it's just a very clear call from me to be part of the solution as well going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Veronica. We come to the end of our workshop, so thank you very much for joining here in Brussels and in very big numbers online. You will find, once ready, by the end of the year, the latest in January, the final report of the study AS02, ANS03, the recording of this workshop and the slides published on the ERA website. Thank you very much and have a good day.